reputation in the region, and I think almost everyone in the region will want and hope for a strong Indonesia.
Phase 1 of the new capital city development is nearly over. There are 4 more to go.
We haven't heard of actually any solid foreign deals where foreign investors are concerned yet. But I think everyone's sort of sitting on their hands to see who will be president before they commit that money to the building. So whatever it is, 80% of the funds that will build this new city will have to come from foreign sources.
So if that 80% of foreign investment doesn't come through, what does that mean? What will happen?
Well, I think whatever the case, if the foreign investment doesn't come in, it may be that this first phase 1 gets built and then everything sort of is held in abeyance and the larger, fancier projects will not get started within the time frame that Widodo was aiming for, which is in the next 20 years, which is a very long sort of time period where the presidential term is concerned, because each new president only has up to 2 terms, which is 10 years. So like it or not, he has to sort of trust in the process that the next 1, 2, maybe 3 presidents will still continue to keep adding to this capital.
So can Indonesia pull off relocating its capital? The first stage started 2 years ago, and there's confidence it will complete on time this August. The remaining 4 phases are reliant on billions of dollars from foreign investors. So far, the government is struggling to get them to commit. Without them, the project looks set to stall. As well as the challenge of paying for Nusantara, enough people need to be convinced to live and work there. There's more to this than the legacy project of an outgoing president. Not all of his potential replacements share the vision. Jakarta is overpopulated, polluted and sinking. There are doubts over how much relocation helps with that, or tackling economic inequality. With the overall completion date 21 years away, Indonesia's next president will determine what happens next. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier, and produced by Matt Tolson and Jill Collins. The editor was Tara McDermott and technical producer Nikki Edwards.
That was the BBC's The Inquiry. I'm Jeff Goods here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. Thanks for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on that CBC Listen app on your Wednesday morning. 1 more week left in January, folks, but we have nothing to stress about with these temperatures. Our high in Winnipeg is -1 today. So that's what we have coming. Now, beware, we have a risk of freezing drizzle, so that could make things a little challenging out there for walking or biking or driving, anyway you're commuting. So we'll keep an eye on that. We're on air with you till 8:37 a.m. If you need to call us on the commute, 788-3093. Let's say good morning to the team. Mr. Abiadiemi, my friend behind the controls, our technical producer, who also will be covering the weather forecast on the program. Good morning to Corey Funk, who is our show director and also covers the commute on air. Good morning to the triumphant return of Travis Peterson. Woo! Travis behind the YouTube controls this morning. And Heather Wells is in our newsroom as well. Good morning to you, Heather, with headlines.
Good morning. Yes, people inside one of Winnipeg's biggest shelters were forced out by carbon monoxide yesterday afternoon. Emergency crews were called to the Main Street project. Firefighters worked to get everyone out of the shelter and into a transit bus. They then ventilated the building. 2 people assessed by paramedics at the scene were taken to hospital, although their injuries aren't believed to be related to the carbon monoxide. One is in stable condition, the other is listed as unstable. And the city of Winnipeg has filed separate lawsuits against 2 vacant property owners this month for allegedly racking up $20,000 each in unpaid inspection bills and other fees. Together, those 2 property owners own 6 vacant buildings across Winnipeg's inner city. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right, Heather, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This morning on the show, we're going to talk about a new report that looks at the future of dementia in Canada and how the demographics of those living with the condition are aging, especially people who come from Asian communities. So we'll hear more about that. Also, why some kids are focused on anti-aging skincare routines. And yes, I said kids. 10-year-olds looking for skincare routines because they feel like they have wrinkles. Man, that makes me sad. We're going to talk to a dermatologist all about this trend and why it's worrying from their perspective. And COVID-19 is back on our medical column, and you'll hear why. But you got to stay with us. World Report's next.
On Q with Tom Power.
The actor Jake Johnson rose to fame on the hit TV show New Girl. That led to some massive movie franchises like Jurassic World and Spider-Man. Jake will be here to tell you what it took to juggle writing, directing, producing, and starring in his new film, Self-Reliance.
Did you just ask if I was having fun?
Yes?
No!
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. Now, investigators are trying to figure out what caused a plane to go down near Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories. We know there are fatalities, that the people on board were on their way to work at a diamond mine, but we will not know how many until later today. The CBC's Juanita Taylor now on how the community is coping.
The community is in shock. We're a very close-knit community.
Fort Smith's Deputy Mayor, Diana Carroll, took part in a prayer service last night at the Anglican Church to be with her community as they grieve for the lives lost in a tragic plane crash Tuesday morning.
Our thoughts and our hearts and our prayers are out to those who are all affected. I mean, everybody has somebody that they know, or, it's very devastating, and families are grieving, and we just hope that everybody has the strength to carry on and get through this tragedy.
In a news release, Rio Tinto confirmed the Northwestern Air Lease flight was on its way to bring workers to the Diavik diamond mine, about 500 kilometers from Fort Smith. Officials have not said how many people were on board the flight. Garth Eggenberger is the territory's chief coroner.
At this time, we're only saying that there are fatalities. We know there are fatalities, but we don't know how many. Once the team is on the ground and has visited the site, then they will let me know, and then we'll issue an official statement.
The Transportation Safety Board is sending a team of investigators to the crash site. For the people of Fort Smith and across the Northwest Territories, counseling services are being offered by the Health and Social Services Authority to help with the shock and pain being felt by so many people. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Rankin Inlet, Nunavut.
Russia says a military transport plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has crashed. Video posted online shows the plane exploding in a fireball in the Russian region of Belgorod near Ukraine. Russian officials say all 74 people on board died. The aircraft was reportedly carrying Ukrainian prisoners of war to the border for an exchange. It's not clear what caused the crash. Russia's foreign ministry says Ukraine shot the plane down. So far, Ukraine has not commented. Russian investigators are on their way to the crash site. It appears that the path to becoming the Republican presidential nominee has been cleared for Donald Trump. The former U.S. president easily took the New Hampshire primary against his only competitor, Nikki Haley. Steve Futterman is in New Hampshire and joins me now. So, Steve, it was a big win for Donald Trump, but not exactly the numbers he was hoping for. Tell us about that.
Marcia, Donald Trump got his win, but it wasn't the 20 or 30 percentage points or even larger margin he wanted. He is going to win, but it looks like by only around 10 percentage points. Nikki Haley ends up in the 40% range, a good showing for her. And much to Trump's chagrin, she is going nowhere. Last night, she sounded as upbeat as ever.
Well, I'm a fighter. And today we got close to half of the vote. We still have a ways to go, but we keep moving up.
And she even poked at Trump, again raising his age and in a sense saying, put up or shut up.
I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me. If he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me.
Now, Trump and his campaign officials are still supremely confident he's going to get the nomination, but they want Haley to call it quits. Even though he was the victor last night, Trump was visibly annoyed at the way Haley reacted.
Let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night.
So, Steve, does this assure Trump versus Biden part 2?
Yes, it seems to. Even Joe Biden last night issued a statement indicating it's now clear there will be this rematch. Now, Scott Jennings is a former advisor to George W. Bush. He says this is clearly not appealing to the American people.
The American people don't want this rematch. I mean, let's just acknowledge that the parties have given us a helping of something off the menu that no one ordered.
But that's the meal they got. That's the meal that they're likely going to have to live with. And we're going to be talking about Trump versus Biden unless something unusual happens from now until November.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Marcia.
Freelance reporter Steve Futterman in New Hampshire. The federal government is spending more on security for MPs than ever before. It cost more than $2.5 million last year. That is $1 million more than it cost 5 years ago. And it does not include the Prime Minister's security. Pierre-Yves Bourdras is a former deputy commissioner with the RCMP.
5 years ago was a different world than it is today. And I'm sure you can appreciate that. The more polarization you're seeing in Canadian politics, the more there's overt threats against different parties.
The RCMP will not say which MPs have received protection. We're keeping a close eye on the Bank of Canada. The central bank will make its latest interest rate policy announcement later this morning. It is widely expected to leave interest rates unchanged, but as Peter Armstrong reports, there could be hints about where those rates are heading.
It's been a rough couple of years for Canadian households squeezed by rising prices and climbing interest rates. A mere 22 months ago, the Bank of Canada's key overnight lending rate was at 0.25%. Today, that rate stands at 5%. When last we heard from Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, he was asked why he couldn't be more clear about when rates were going to come down.
When rates were really low and it was clear we had a long way to go up, we were pretty clear rates were going up. Right now, we're at a situation where we've held for 3 meetings. We're taking it 1 meeting at a time, and I think you just have to take that at face value. I mean, that's how we're feeling.
Today's meeting is expected to make that 4 straight announcements without change. Economists say the bank is wary of declaring victory too soon and being forced to backtrack. But RBC economist Claire Fan says the bank's own economic forecasts make it clear inflation is coming back under control. The economy has slowed, and soon, though not quite yet, the bank should be able to tell Canadians when they can expect some relief.
Probably some are at the start of Q2 and for them to cut later in Q2. So around middle of the year is sort of our expectations for the first rate cut.
And Fan says her projections show that by this time next year, the bank's key lending rate will have fallen 1 full percentage point. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
A Nova Scotia couple has won a small claims case against Air Canada. The airline canceled their connecting flight from Toronto to New York in July 2022. Air Canada blamed it on the pandemic, but the couple says the airline refused to comply with the legislation that protects passengers' rights. Angela McIver has the story.
I'm really happy with the decision, and I'm also happy that we decided to pursue it.
Vicki Lynn Black and her husband Terry are getting most of what they fought for, $1,583. Their flight to New York 2 summers ago landed 7 hours late. When Air Canada offered them each a $300 e-coupon, they declined.
The air passenger rights regulations clearly state that we're entitled to cash, that we're entitled to $700, and that there's no expiration. All this spoke to us that they were just not willing to comply with the regulations.
The airline blamed the delay on crew constraints due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but Nova Scotia's small claims court adjudicator decided that wasn't a suitable reason 2 years into the pandemic, and noted the airline didn't present any evidence to support its case. He also ruled against Air Canada's attempts to stay the proceeding while other cases play out across the country. Those include an Ottawa man who was taking on WestJet and 2 pending class action lawsuits in Quebec and BC. Gabor Lukács is with Air Passenger Rights.
The message sent in this ruling is that Air Canada should not be permitted to abuse the judicial system.
In a statement to CBC, Air Canada said it's reviewing the decision. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
In New Brunswick, the Chase the Ace jackpot has a winner.
Oui, monsieur, vous l'avez!
Danny and Muriel Robbins won more than $8.2 million. They picked the right envelope. It is believed to be one of the largest Chase the Ace wins in the country. Play on this game has been happening for nearly a year. The couple went in on the ticket with their son and his girlfriend. They say they don't know what they'll do with their newfound fortune, and they can't believe their luck. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
$8.2 million. Wow, that's a real deal. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3. Or you might be listening on the CBC Listen app or watching us on YouTube this morning. Hi, everyone. It is in the city of Winnipeg, -2, and we'll get more weather in a moment. This hour on the program, the conversation continues. You were writing to us and calling us. During the show yesterday, we got some emails from people who are worried. One Winnipegger says he's worried that people will blame international students for Canada's housing crunch, and that is after the Fed's announcement to make changes this week to how international students arrive here. So we're going to start with a conversation with that Winnipegger who called us because we reached him post-show. Also, we'll discuss a new report about the future of dementia and hear why some Asian Canadians might be represented more in the new demographics and numbers. So we'll hear about that. Plus, we've got this concerning interview about kids who are focused on anti-aging skincare routines. 10-year-olds who think they have wrinkles. So stay tuned. We'll talk about it. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for a news update. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the co-founder of a Winnipeg-based de-escalation team supports the collection of race-based data by RCMP. 2 weeks ago, the Mountie started a pilot project in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. People's races are collected by officers during arrests, wellness checks, and when there's use of force. Daniel Hidalgo at Sabe Peace Walkers says he's had negative interactions with police in the past and feels it is in part due to the way he looks, and that's why he says he supports this initiative. We're going to hear more about the program coming up. As well, relief for remote Manitoba communities. Of more than half of Manitoba winter roads now are open, but other communities like St. Teresa Point are still waiting for those roads to open. Their chief calling for more all-season roads for remote communities. Our next local news is coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, speaking of the roads, let's get into the weather conditions this morning. Hi, Abby Adiemi.
I'm going to take a cue from Heather. She mentioned seasons, and I'm going to say we're like way... The normal high is always -12.
Yes, that's what we're supposed to be on.
Yeah, but look at that. We are heading to -1.
Yeah, it's just, it's not unheard of. As I said yesterday, we had these little blips before, but I don't remember a year where we were so mild leading up to the holiday season and then that cold snap, and now we're back where we were before.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now for commuters, as you're gearing up for your day, we're waking up to cloudy skies with a slight chance of that risk of freeze and drizzle. And, coming in this morning, I noticed some fog patches. However, they're kind of dissipating, but the word for you is to be cautious on the roads because the current temperature is at -2 degrees and the wind is blowing west. But remember, freezing drizzle is the word. If you're going to be on the road, you need to take some extra time for your commute with this temperature going to be hitting -1 today. So you need to be careful. But right now, Winnipeg is at -2 degrees.
I'm totally outing you right now with Corey. You ready?
Go ahead.
He doesn't like wearing winter coats, man.
Oh, my! I didn't. You're not supposed to talk about that.
So wait, then what do you
I don't
wear?
know how you survive.
So what do you do? Like just an insulated T-shirt?
Hey, this is an intervention for your health.
I know it's an intervention. Now she's outing me.
I'm teasing him.
I know, but it's just the heavy part.
They are. But
It's like extra weight and
for you, Abby, I'm glad it's -1 today then.
so I put on my jacket and I'm on the scale and I'm like, I feel bad. That's it.
That's funny. That's funny. All right. Now you ran here as usual, I'm guessing.
Yes.
What was it like?
It's surprising how quickly things are starting to get mushy out there on the sidewalks. Like, I was actually a little more slippery than you'd maybe expect this time in the morning already. Sun's not even up and things are already starting to feel a little melty out there. And it doesn't necessarily mean a straightforward commute on the highways either. Already got a call from Jackie who said she was on westbound Highway 1 and right by Highway 12, that turn off there to Steinbach, there's actually 5 semis in the ditch that she saw. Yeah, so be really careful out there. She says she's actually seen some of that freezing drizzle out there on the number 1 east of the city there by Steinbach. Okay. So just be careful there. Very, very slippery conditions, says Jackie. Yeah, 570s in the ditch on the turnoff to Highway 12 there from number 1. So be very, very careful if you're hitting the highway city. Curious to see what you're seeing out there if you're on the perimeter or anywhere else on the highways or here in the city. Let me know what you're seeing and I will update your fellow drivers. Looks like we're in for a bit of a slippery morning. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I alluded to, let's begin today's show with the ongoing conversation that you've been having with us about the federal government's 2-year cap on the number of international undergrad students who will be accepted to Canada. Immigration Minister Mark Miller made the announcement Monday and said the cap is needed in part to help address housing concerns for international students in the market. Now, in a moment, a follow-up interview with a Manitoban who's concerned about this and how it's been framed and wrote to us during the show yesterday. First, though, just some brief reaction from a few of the students and faculty from the University of Manitoba.
My name is Tafazo Keith Mdio. They should make up their mind what exactly they're trying to do, if they're trying to increase the population of Canada or not, because a lot of people know back home, people know Canada is a place that anyone can come as long as you're qualified. And now that's going to change drastically, and people's career paths are going to change because of these decisions that they're making. They should also be considerate of other people.
My name is Harmeet Singh Chabla. I work at the Department of Plant Science here. This change, I don't think it's in Canada. I think it's worldwide. There's a negative sentiments going against immigration. I think people have to realize that students actually bring a lot here. So they bring in money, they bring in cultural diversity, they also bring in a lot of different work experience.
Martin Itzkow is the Manitoba Executive Director of the Coalition of Manitoba Cultural Communities for Families. He has regular meetings with all kinds of different people, groups, and Manitobans, and has for years, as you'll hear. But he emailed us during the show, as I mentioned, with some concerns about how this whole announcement was framed. So we called him up after we got off air.
One of the concerns that we have within the coalition is the visibility of cultural communities as contributors to our community and not just simply consuming resources, as many folks and sometimes governments believe that to be true. The interesting aspect is the work we're doing is very much about bringing the voices of the cultural communities and amplifying their voices around policy. And the work has brought us to the conversation about what's the future of cultural communities and what's the vision of the future of how cultural communities can actually strengthen Manitoba. And so when I heard the story this morning, it was the frame and the lens that students potentially were a challenge, a problem, but we know that international students, eventually they actually convert to become permanent residents and citizens of the province, and we know that's very valuable. So how do we bring that conversation into it? And that to me was really the point that I was actually paying attention to this morning.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're executive director of the group you've been mentioning, the Coalition of Cultural Communities for Families here out of Manitoba. For listeners that don't know what that organization is, how long have you been around? And tell me a bit about the people that you meet with.
Well, we've been around formally since 2018 when we were incorporated, but our reality is we go back almost 13 years when there were in the policy.
Nothing about us without us.
Exactly. It's interesting. Do you remember Martin Sandy? We had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Kate, Martin is still working with us, and he's out of Sweden, if people do not know. And the challenge in Sweden is similar to what's happening here in Canada, where a lot of the people who are making policy are having real difficulties in accepting the fact that often they're not listening, not able to listen for all kinds of reasons. And it's time to listen in a very different way. But let the communities come forward and let the communities guide the process in terms of understanding how communities are experiencing their lives here, both positively and negatively.
And that will change framing around all kinds of different things in communication as well. So to back to the story of this morning, I want to read you verbatim the headline, quote, "Measure to limit international student permits comes in response to housing crunch," end quote. Someone might say that that's a fact, that it does come in response to issues with having people not have resources or roofs over their heads when they come here, and that would be ideal to have better services. But can you explain to people, Martin, why even that framing is something to you that is problematic?
Well, the way I would read that, it's sort of, I think it's blaming that the international students have caused this problem. But we know for many, many, many years in Manitoba and Winnipeg, there's been a housing crunch for lots of people. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this is the cause of that problem. It's exacerbated because of the numbers of international students. But I do have to go back to many years ago when I was the Director of Immigration for Manitoba. There was a real concern about the fact that international students were being charged a differential fee. It was making money for systems. Everybody was trying to benefit from that. But the other reality is that, yes, we were taking advantage to some extent of international students being able to cover the cost for lots of educational systems. But also the other reality that was never put into place is, so when they actually finished being students, were they able to stay in Manitoba and contribute? We now know that's true. So why don't we start from the place of where we look at the strengths of international students and how do we work together to actually focus on a lot of the challenges, and housing is one of them, but they didn't cause the housing crunch.
We heard one of the students say that part of the challenge here with what we've heard from the federal Liberal government is that they, on one hand, are talking about increasing immigration, and on the other hand, they came out with this. What would you say to that?
Well, it's interesting. The reality is the levels or the numbers of people that they're looking at being able to land over the next couple of years is a very large number. My question was the consideration of housing and all the other challenges that the new Canadians would face, was that a consideration too? And if it wasn't, why not? And I looked at that number, I said, that's amazing for Canada, for Manitoba, but was there a consideration of what happens locally, and how does the province play a role in it? And the provinces are having real difficulties, cities are having difficulties, and this is something that the larger systems have to pay attention to. But I will say, from a cultural community point of view, bring the communities into the conversation too. They have a stake in this. I understand government's point of view. I know how difficult it is for any level of government, because this is a really significant issue, and it's been long-term. It's not a short-term issue and needs a long-term fix. But don't blame and don't see that there's a specific group that's causing that. Our role is looking at the vision of cultural communities in Manitoba and what roles they will play. We believe that their voices need to be heard in all forms of policy development.
That's Martin Itzkow, the Manitoba Executive Director of the Coalition of Manitoba Cultural Communities for Families.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Liftoff. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
Always makes me dance, that music. It's -2, it's cloudy in Winnipeg, and we're heading for, -1, so it won't move much. It's going to be a mild day. Joanne actually texted us and said it's beautiful outside. She said she felt overdressed, and I think that's going to be the theme of the day. So if you want to show us your springtime smile on this January day, Why don't you email us a photo, radio893@cbc.ca. I'll post that up on YouTube soon. We so often ask you to show us your cold weather face or your parka or your toque. We did that a few weeks ago. And just sometimes we can't even see your face. But today, I think you can be brave enough to show us your face and give us a big Manitoba smile. So if you want to send us a pic, we'll try to get up on our YouTube page while the show's streaming there. So CBC's email at the show to get pictures in, radio893@cbc.ca. Well, speaking of pictures and how we look, there is no good reason that a 10-year-old should be worrying about wrinkles. But there's been a lot of talk about young girls storming makeup counters looking for anti-aging products. And it's because of what they've seen on social media, the trend of teens and tweens focusing on their skincare routine. Dr. Fane Fry is with us, dermatologist and author of the Skincare Hoax. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you?
I'm fine, but I mean, how concerned are you about this?
Look, we don't know the impact that these ingredients are going to have on young skin. That's number one. So that's a bit of a concern. Two, the psychological development of these kids. We already live in a world that overemphasizes beauty. So is this going to just, put that problem on steroids, as the expression goes, is also a concern.
In terms of the stuff in the products that could be damaging to skin, can you elaborate a bit on that? What kinds of things are you thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest one are the retinoids, vitamin A derivatives. Vitamin A in high doses affects bone development. Now, these cosmetics have very, very minute amounts of very weak retinoids. So whether that being applied on the skin is going to make any impact, probably not. But whether they have some sort of allergies or sensitivities to all these ingredients, I think that's the concern. But again, there's no good science. Nobody's studying these ingredients on children. There has been no reason to do so as of now.
What do you make of the trend of preteen kids becoming obsessed with skincare and particularly anti-aging?
Well, look, here's the good news. It's good to teach self-care and kids to have pride in how they look. That's the good news. To teach them that a skincare routine is important, most importantly, applying sunscreen, because we know the damaging effects of the sun. So to encourage your child to wear sunscreen and to moisturize when the skin is dry, that's a good thing. But again, I'm not a psychologist, but when you do the studies and you read, we are way too much of facing the mirror and not facing the world. And to teach children at the age of 10 that their self-worth is wrapped up in their wrinkles or lack thereof or preventing the wrinkle, I think that's a real concern.
Whether we actively teach them or not, that's the message they're getting. I know I talked to another doctor here who was a plastic surgeon who actually said he had young girls, not 10. He was talking more 18 to 25 was the ranges that he cited. But he was saying people were coming in because they wanted to change their faces because they were so used to seeing themselves now, on Zoom and the selfies that they just started to imagine that they should look like their filters. So it's kind of all this messaging is out there for young people. You talked about, things that kids could benefit from, like understanding moisturizing and sunscreen. What's a good regular skincare routine for a 10-year-old?
A good 10-year-old should cleanse twice a day because they're acne or pre-acne, so that's probably a good idea. Moisturizer, again, if the skin is dry. And every day, absolutely sunscreen on the face and the back of the hands. And I plug a website called FryFace, FryFace. We don't sell anything. It's just a good place for parents to go to select safe, effective, affordable products that they can buy right at their local drugstores so that then they can have their children go. The kids like to be on the computer. They can go and just, again, select safe, made by nationally and internationally known brands to get the kids involved in taking care of themselves, which is ultimately what they want to do.
What advice would you give to parents who might have kids asking them for skincare and specifically anti-aging products?
I've been asked this question. I tell them to take the money equivalent, put it in a jar, and when that child's ready to go off to college, the money will be sitting there waiting for them.
That's smart, especially because some of the creams cost $80.
That's correct. An ounce.
What would you say if you're a dermatologist, you're a doctor, if a child asked you for advice, or maybe they came to you, let's talk about their real concern and let's legitimize this. If a 10-year-old came to you as a dermatologist and was worried about wrinkles, what would you explain to them about their skin?
I'd say to take care of yourself by, again, applying sunscreen, eat well, exercise, get good nights of sleep, because your skin's health is going to parallel a healthy body, and that's going to make a much bigger difference than spending money on a cosmetic, which is really only designed to beautify, not designed to really change the structure or function of anything, because if it did, it would be a drug by law. So I wouldn't waste my time, energy, and money in that regard.
How effective overall are skincare products, more generally speaking, for preventing or slowing signs of aging even in adults?
Cosmetics, not very much, because again, these are cosmetics that by law are not designed to change anything. That's how the law is written. Sunscreen, however, is regulated like a drug, and it can make a huge impact by protecting your face from the damaging rays of the sun.
Do you think that dermatologists play, a role in this and have a responsibility in countering the anti-aging bias that we have overall, particularly, I guess, toward women?
I do. I think they do, and I think most dermatologists do a pretty good job. They emphasize wellness over beauty. Are there some that are just emphasizing beauty and physicality? Of course, like in any industry. But I think the overwhelming majority of my colleagues do a very good job of emphasizing wellness.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning to talk about this. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Stay warm.
Thank you. We will. That's Dr. Fayne Fry, the author of The Skincare Hoax. We reached her in New York this morning to talk about this. If you want to weigh in, 788-3205. In traffic, briefly, Highway 1 East. It may be really slick out that way, specifically at Highway 12, the turnoff to Steinbach and St. Anne. We had a call from Jackie saying 5 semis were in the ditch. So beware of that area and call us if you have any updates, 788-3093. Business News after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's hard to believe it's January when you step outside. It's -2 right now in Winnipeg. We're headed to a high today of -1. We do have a risk of freezing drizzle today. The co-founder of a Winnipeg-based de-escalation team supports the collection of race-based data by RCMP. 2 weeks ago, the Mounties started a pilot project in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. People's races are collected by officers during arrests, wellness checks, and when there's use of force. Daniel Hidalgo helps to run Sabe Peace Walkers. He's half Jamaican and half Indigenous from Chile. Hidalgo says he's had negative interactions with police in the past, and he feels it is due in part to the way he looks. That's why he says he supports this initiative.
We use that data to find remedial responses and to promote positive resources. For me, I'm all for that. And I think that could also contribute to police learning new approaches and finding ways to essentially become relationship-based de-escalators.
But Hidalgo says it could be tricky for officers using visual observations alone to collect data. He says there should be conversations and ways for people to self-identify. The family of a South Sudanese man killed by Winnipeg police nearly 5 years ago are still waiting for an inquest. Matchwar Madut was fatally shot in February of 2019. Manitoba's chief medical officer called an inquest into his death 5 months later, but no hearings have been held. Lawyer Jillian Nachiu has been involved in several inquests, and she says it can be a long process, especially when dealing with government records.
Sometimes you'll get a set of records, you'll realize they're incomplete, or they'll point you to a new set of records, and you have to go off and get those. It all sounds very easy. I struggle to sort of articulate how complex it can be, but I know having done it, it's an enormous amount of work.
The province says Madut's case has a number of unique challenges, including gathering his medical records. People inside one of Winnipeg's biggest shelters were forced out by carbon monoxide yesterday afternoon. Emergency crews were called to the Main Street project. Firefighters worked to get everyone out of the shelter and into a transit bus. They then ventilated the building. 2 people were assessed by paramedics at the scene. One was taken to hospital in stable condition, the other unstable, although their injuries are not believed related to the carbon monoxide. CBC News has learned the security costs associated with protecting our members of parliament are soaring. The numbers show this year's RCMP bill is projected to be close to double what it was just 2 years ago, which doesn't surprise former Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino.
I do think that we are now living in an era where we are beset with disinformation and propaganda and foreign interference and cyber attacks and transnational repression, all of which makes for a very complicated threat environment.
For the upcoming fiscal year, the cost for MP security is expected to top $3.4 million, and that doesn't include the Prime Minister's security costs. The RCMP won't say which MPs are receiving protection. Well, Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire Republican presidential primary.
USA!
Trump supporters celebrating the former president's victory in New Hampshire as expected. It was a comfortable win. Reports suggest Trump secured at least 54% of the vote to Nikki Haley's 43%. Haley insists she will stay in the race. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. One person is in critical condition at last word after a house fire in the 800 block of Lorette. When crews arrived just after 5 yesterday afternoon, heavy smoke was coming from the bungalow. Once they got inside, they found one person. That person was rushed to hospital. A dog was also found dead inside that house. The city of Winnipeg has filed separate lawsuits against 2 vacant property owners this month for allegedly racking up about $20,000 each in unpaid inspection bills and other fees. Together, the two own 6 vacant buildings across Winnipeg's inner city. All the buildings have been subject to a number of annual inspections between 2016 and 2023. Both owners were billed yearly inspection charges and empty building fees during those years, but the city says both have failed to pay any of the money they owe, and it's time to cough it up. Relief for remote Manitoba communities as more than half of Manitoba's winter roads are now open, connecting dozens of isolated communities with the rest of the province. Kevin Carlson in the Northern Chiefs Group, Manitoba, Kuwait, Naui, Okemekanek, says supplies can now get to those communities and people can get out.
There was some concern, especially into mid-December when temperatures and snowfall wasn't nearly what we would normally have. Things have straightened out in January. There's a little less concern, and people have started to travel.
Some northern communities are still waiting for their winter roads to open. In all, winter roads serve 30,000 Manitobans in 22 communities. You can find more news updated throughout the morning at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, Abby Adiemi, let's get into this regional forecast. It's got us all smiling.
I know I'm just smiling here because I cannot believe it's January. It's just like we're below the seasonal, so it's like really making me feel good this morning. It's like I feel so good. I might just take off my toque or something. If I had one.
Abby's leading me into telling you what I'm posting right now on Facebook. So he did take off his toque, de-toquing as it's called. And I'm going to post some pictures of that to try and inspire you to take a pic of your quote-unquote springtime smile for our YouTube channel. So email radio893@cbc.ca. We always ask you to take cold weather pictures, so why not today? Let's see that smile, everybody, because you probably can show your face with -1 as a high. So email radio893@cbc.ca, and you can check out YouTube, or you can also check out my Facebook page.
So let's look around the province now. This morning, yes, the city remains under that cloudy skies with the risk of freezing drizzle. The current temperature sits at -2 degrees. As we move into the day, just expect the cloud cover to stick around. And don't forget, we have a south blowing breeze, but it's really, really light. We're looking at a high of -1 today. Brandon is at -3 with the mist. Mainly sunny later today in the Westman region with a risk of freezing drizzle, also heading to a high of -2. Thompson, -12 with light snow. The period of light snow in the northern end of the province will later end, and then there's going to be a mix of sun and cloud. Temperatures will drop to -17 in the afternoon. Churchill is at -22, partly cloudy over there. You'll also be getting some light snow this morning, and then when it ends, it's going to be clear all the way. Temperatures will drop to -25. Gimli is at -2. It's going to be cloudy today. For the Interlake region, you'll be having that risk of freezing drizzle, and then you will find yourself at a high of -1. Dauphin is currently at -5. It's cloudy out there. You're going to see a high of -3. Steinbach is at -2. You're going to see a high of -1. Morris and the Pembina Valley region is cloudy at -2. And of course, there's also that risk of freezing drizzle, but you'll be seeing a high of -1. Winnipeg is currently at -2.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, I know we're smiling about the weather forecast by the numbers, but actually driving and commuting could be where we have to get serious because we've already had calls about some issues.
That's right. I have to be a bit of the buzzkill here this morning. It does, that freezing drizzle, this kind of freeze-thaw kind of vibes out there, that does mean some slippery conditions, particularly on the highways. Actually, already got a call from Jackie on Highway number 1 westbound, right by the turnoff to number 12. That's the highway that takes you to Steinbach. She said she saw actually 5 semis in the ditch. So just heads up, very slippery on Highway number 1 east of the city, around that highway, that turnoff to Highway 12. Be very careful there. I'm also curious what else you're seeing out there. What's the perimeter looking like? What's the Highway number 1 west of the city looking like? Highway 75. Curious what you're seeing. Give me a call so I can let your fellow listeners know what to expect when they hit the roads this morning, especially here in the city. If you're walking, biking, driving, curious what you're seeing as well. Sidewalks, a little slushy, but still fairly grippy. Probably won't be the case in a few hours as things continue to warm up. Give me a call on that CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey Funk.
Thank you.
Crystal Ramlakan joins us now via Zoom with our business report. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with oil. Oil company ExxonMobil is suing 2 sustainable investment firms. Why are they suing?
Well, it's in an effort to block them from putting forward a shareholder proposal that would commit the company to further curb its greenhouse gas emissions. So the Texas-based oil giant says the investment firms only became shareholders to put forward proposals that would diminish the business. Exxon alleges the goal is to force it to change the nature of its business or to go out of business entirely. But the investment firms have put forward proposals for more than a decade at Exxon and other oil and gas companies. Now, they say Exxon is trying to prevent them from using their rights. They say investors face economic risks from climate change, and they have a right to voice their opinion and their concern. But last year, efforts by investors to push Exxon on climate change fizzled out as shareholders struck down numerous proposals to cut greenhouse gas emissions. So for more on this, here's Warren Mabey, who is the director of the Queen's Institute for Energy and Environmental Policy.
This becomes a very interesting kind of dynamic. How does the company work with investors? Is the signal that they're sending that they don't want certain types of investors, that they don't anticipate changing their business? Is this a case where you have the investors demanding one course, but the company deciding to go a completely different way?
Now, Exxon has launched a business to invest $20 billion in carbon capture, lithium, and other low carbon technologies. And interestingly enough here, Marcy, this lawsuit comes amid growing political opposition to some investors' recent emphasis on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, issues at public companies.
Let's go to another story. This one's about Netflix, which is Netflix is taking another big step into live events. What are they doing now?
Yeah, that's right. So it has a new almost $7 billion deal that would make it the exclusive home of World Wrestling Entertainment's Raw starting in January next year. So this 10-year partnership will put Raw on the streaming platform here in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Latin America, and other areas. Now, outside of the U.S., Netflix will also exclusively telecast all WWE shows and specials. So Raw debuted in 1993, and it's produced 1,600 episodes. Now, WWE also announced it reached a deal with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that will give the star the rights to his nickname. And he's also going to join the board of directors of TKO Group, which is the parent company of WWE. So for more on this, here's Laura Martin, who is a senior analyst at Needham & Company.
I think Netflix is recreating the cable bundle. And what you're going to see is they're going to go increasingly into sports, which means that their cost of content is going to grow over time. Because, like, for example, over at the Walt Disney Company, about 30% of their total cost is sports content. So we should be expecting Netflix to move towards live events like news and sports, and that will increase their content budgets over time.
Now, Netflix also reported its latest earnings yesterday, posting the best customer gains since a surge during the pandemic. It signed up just over 13 million customers in the final 3 months of last year.
Guilty pleasure alert. Anything with The Rock, I'm usually all in for. From ballers to wrestling to whatever it is, all the Jumanjis. I don't know. The guy makes me laugh. All right, let's go to the markets this morning.
So in Europe, markets are higher. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, Alibaba popped 6%, pushing Hong Kong stocks higher, but other markets are mostly lower. Japan is down. Shanghai and Hong Kong are both up. Oil is down 4 cents to 74.33 US per barrel. Gold is up $2.68 to $2,031.96 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.06 of a cent to 74.35 cents US.
All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Marcy. Talk to you later.
That's Crystalie Ramlakan via Zoom with our business report. 6:44 a.m. It is Wednesday morning. We got 1 week left in January, and it is not acting like it, is it? -2 right now in the city of Winnipeg. Now, driving an issue. Highway 1 and Highway 12 could be very slick out that way. We've had a call. Update us if you can. 788-3093. Still ahead in this half hour of the program, we have our medical column. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is going to talk about COVID-19 this morning. So it's been a long time since we actually talked about COVID. Where is it at? And what is the worry? And what do you do if you've got expired tests in your cupboard? Right now, though, Canada's population is growing and aging rapidly. And with those demographic changes come new challenges, particularly for our healthcare system. There's a new report by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. It says by 2050, there will be nearly 3 times the number of people in this country living with dementia than there are today. And racialized Canadians will also make up a larger percentage of those affected by the condition. Joshua Armstrong is with us, lead author of the study and research scientist at the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So tell us more about the key reports in this, findings in this report.
Sure. This report builds off of a report we released back in 2022, where we looked at projections for dementia in Canada from 2020 to 2050. That report found that we expect a almost tripling of numbers during that time period, reaching 1.7 million people living with dementia in Canada by 2050 if the trends continue as they are. With the second report, we wanted to build off that and break down some of those numbers, put a face to those numbers, and better understand some of the diversity that we see amongst people living with dementia in Canada.
Now, one of the big things around that in this report says, by 2050, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada predicting 1 in 4 Canadians living with dementia will be of Asian origin. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, yeah. In 2020, it's about 8%, but then by 2050, that grows to 20, just almost 25%. So 1 in 4. That's primarily driven not by a difference in risk for Asian individuals, but more so for the aging of that demographic. So people who have immigrated here from South and East Asian countries are now getting older, and then we're seeing a lot of growth in that population. So we see a growth in older adults and the diversity of older adults. We also see a growth in the diversity of people living with dementia as well. So this report breaks that down a little bit and gives some projections of what we might expect by 2050.
So what should the response be in terms of the structures in our healthcare system to get ready for this?
I think we need to optimize our supports to meet the needs of individuals living with dementia. So that's understanding these differences within the population. It could be things as simple as language, so making sure that we have tools and education available in the languages that people speak, but also recognizing there are cultural differences in the understanding of dementia and cultural differences in the amount of stigma related to dementia and other mental health conditions. So trying to tailor our supports to meet the needs of individuals, I think, is an important step that we need to take.
Can you elaborate on what you mean on that point about language for communities to not to get over the stigma of this?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of language, lots of materials have been developed dementia in French and English. So if you don't speak one of those 2 languages, you might not be able to get the education you need about what dementia is and how to prepare if you get a diagnosis. But also just trying to understand that some cultural groups might be afraid of a dementia diagnosis, or there might be some stigma involved there. Making sure that we have supports that address their specific concerns and in a way that's culturally safe and relatable to them. You want to make sure that you're talking not just in the same language, but in the same way that people will understand so they can best take action to address their needs.
This is one part of what you're calling a landmark study. Why are you using that language, landmark? Why is research like this important?
Well, really, it's about we're looking 30 years in the forward, trying to update what we know in terms of dementia and what we expect using the most current trends. There has actually been a shift in the amount of risk that people have getting. We're not seeing as many people living with dementia as what we would say maybe 20 years ago. But despite that positive change with the growing number of older adults in Canada, we expect to see these increasing numbers. And we really want to use this report to educate people about what dementia is and what we might expect if the current trends prevail.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for telling us about the report today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Joshua Armstrong is a research scientist at the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. I'm wondering if what he said around stigma, is something that comes up in your life, or if you want to elaborate on that. How does that show up in your life? Is there stigma around the idea of mental health challenges, or in this specific case, Alzheimer's is what we're talking about? And how does that present? Or maybe you're one of the people working to move that forward and eliminate that stigma. 788-3205 if you're listening and you want to weigh in. Well, let's keep talking about medical issues, because it's time for our medical column. It has been almost 4 years now since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. It's been almost 4 years since our first case in Manitoba, which happened in March. While it may not dominate headlines like it used to, Canadians across this country continue to be infected. And researchers are learning more about some of the long-term effects of COVID infections as well. So that's our medical column. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj spoke to us about it.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with what doctors are seeing regarding COVID infections these days.
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, we're still seeing people who probably have COVID, but they're not necessarily getting tested and proving that they have COVID. But the stats show that we're in one of the biggest waves of COVID infections since the huge Omicron wave back when we were, talking about having to triage ICU beds. But now, if people get severe COVID, it doesn't end them up in hospital from mainly lung problems like it used to. It's much more complicated than that. They tend to get profoundly weak or dehydrated or sort of multi-system organ problems, problems with a bunch of organs at the same time, like lung problems and heart problems and kidney damage. And, some of them end up falling at home, which ends them up in hospital. But, these days, most people's immune systems have had some exposure to COVID, whether that's infection or vaccination or both. And that protects people from severe disease to a large extent. But it doesn't protect you from just getting reinfected. So people are getting reinfected, and that translates into people having complications like long COVID, and then being at risk for problems down the road, like immune system dysfunction, neurological degradation, chronic fatigue, heart and lung problems. It's exhausting to think about how much stress this is going to put on the healthcare system for years to come.
What do scientists understand about the current variants going around?
Yeah, so we know that the majority of infections across Canada are now due to a family of variants called JN1, which is still classified as an Omicron variant, but it's a lot of researchers think that it deserves its own name, just given how different it is from the original Omicron. The symptoms, people say, well, are the symptoms any different? We're seeing people with sore throats and runny noses and fatigue and maybe even some diarrhea and vomiting now, but not a lot of high fever. Often people have a hacking cough that sticks around for weeks, but those symptoms overlap with a lot of other viruses. And, if we're not testing, then we don't know, is it JN1 that's giving you these symptoms or what? And then people say, well, the symptoms all sound mild. It's like, yeah, the surface symptoms sound mild, but it's the microscopic damage that the virus does to your tissues that increases your risk of blood clots and diabetes and brain problems and, things like that make it a bad idea to catch over, to let COVID catch you over and over. Now, the good news is that, the updated COVID vaccines that came out in October still give decent protection against severe disease and hospitalization from JN1. So still, we're talking around 70% protection from those things.
And is there any talk of more updated vaccines this year?
So not updated ones so far. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization, NACI, has put out some preliminary guidance saying that vulnerable people should plan to get another updated vaccine dose. So the XBB dose from the fall, get another dose of that this coming spring. And they're saying that would be most important for people 65 or over, people living in long-term care or any kind of congregate living, and anyone over 6 months of age who might be moderately to severely immunocompromised. And then NACI says that, of course, that springtime dose is going to be especially important if you did not get a fall dose. But even if you did, as long as it's been 3 months or ideally 6 months between doses, then go ahead. And remember, just, the vaccination is only one part of the prevention piece, right? It's along with cleaner air and masking in crowded indoor situations. And, once the weather starts to turn and get warmer, then doing more things outdoors is going to be a lot safer.
What about treatment then? What's the latest on, for example, Paxlovid for treatment of COVID?
Yeah, so another mixed bag. So Paxlovid is a 5-day course of pills that has to be started within 5 days of the onset of symptoms. And the original research on it was done in the highest risk people, which was unvaccinated people. And it showed that it significantly lowered their risk of ending up in hospital or ending up dead from their COVID infection. So since then, though, pretty much everyone has had some immune exposure to COVID, like we talked about. So now the criteria for getting Paxlovid are quite tight in some provinces compared to others. So, the first step is you would need a positive COVID test to qualify, which is getting harder to access, given that, a lot of people don't have those rapid antigen tests at home anymore. Even the ones we do have are starting to hit their expiry dates. Getting PCR tests from clinics or emergency departments is getting more difficult as well. So Paxlovid for treatment is one thing to keep people out of hospital. But the other thing that a lot of researchers are saying is, look, there's some research that suggests that treatment with Paxlovid can reduce your risk of developing long COVID. But so far, the guidelines for prescribing Paxlovid don't take that into account. So the wheels of evidence-based medicine turn pretty slowly when it comes to the evolution of viruses. When you compare those two things, the viruses work way faster than we do. So some doctors think that that's leaving a lot of people suffering from conditions like long COVID that they might not have had if they were treated with Paxlovid, even though it's not officially used for that.
Just before you go this morning, you mentioned the tests and that they could be expiring. Are those rapid antigen tests that are expiring still of any use? Like, should people throw them out?
So I wouldn't bin them. I wouldn't throw them out. It's kind of like using expired meds in your medicine cabinet, right? If you're doing things by the book, yeah, okay, it's expired. But pragmatically, it's probably safe as long as you understand the limitations. So there are a lot of experts who say, look, as long as the control line shows up on the test, then it's still probably a valid test result, even though the test is, officially expired. Just remember that the tests aren't great at detecting low levels of virus, and we know that in most people it takes about 3 or 4 days for the virus to build up enough in their system to trigger the test to turn positive. So if you have a bunch of the tests and you get symptoms, I would start testing on day 1, but I would test every day for at least the first 4 or 5 days. And then, just don't rely on a negative test if you're going to go visit your great-great-grandmother or something like that, because it still might be COVID and they would be at much greater risk than a younger person. So it's one of those things where we're going to still end up seeing a lot of COVID, unfortunately. It's here to stay. So we need to learn to adapt better than we are. But, the wheels of public health policy usually turn even more slowly than the wheels of evidence-based medicine at this point, unfortunately.
All right, Dr. Bardwash, thank you for the update.
My pleasure.
That's Dr. Bardwash with our medical column. Corey Funk is here. We have a developing situation in the commute this morning. We're getting some calls about this.
Right. Highway number 1 westbound. We've been heard about slippery conditions there all morning, but now I've heard about a jackknife semi pretty much halfway between Enola and Dugald. Highway 1 westbound, that's halfway between Highway 12 and Highway 206, blocking pretty much the whole road, actually. Don called to say that people are able to get around. They're kind of sneaking around the semi by taking the shoulder shoulder, but obviously it's kind of catching folks off guard. People are all kind of trying to get into that right lane there so they can kind of slowly sneak around. So just be really careful as you're kind of approaching, I guess, the glass area, which is about halfway between Enola and Dugald, if you're heading westbound on Highway 1, because there's likely to be a jackknife semi there. So if you have any updates on that, I'd love to hear. It's just really slippery around that area, westbound Highway 1, right around the Highway 12 turn off to Steinbach there. Hearing about that all morning about slippery conditions, a few semis in the ditch, actually, is what I've heard. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC community line. We'd love to get some updates about that area in particular. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Corey Funk with your commute this morning. We'll get to headlines in a moment, but while we're on your survival information, so to speak, let's talk forecast. Warm, maybe even slushy underfoot. -2 right now in Winnipeg and cloudy, and later we'll have -1 for a daytime high. We do have a risk of freezing drizzle, so make sure the scraper remains in the car just in case. Heather Wells is in with our headlines now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the co-founder of a Winnipeg-based de-escalation team supports the collection of race-based data by RCMP. 2 weeks ago, the Mounties started a pilot project in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. Daniel Hidalgo runs Sabe Peace Walkers. We're going to hear from him coming up. And people in St. Teresa's Point First Nation are anxiously waiting for colder temperatures so their winter roads can open and they can get essential goods in to their communities. We'll hear more at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
We're going to learn about a march that's being planned for this weekend in community for 19-year-old Afolabi Stephen Opaso, who died. He was shot and killed by police on New Year's Eve. So stay tuned about that. Also, the history of Princess Auto. Now their stadium's named after it.
On the current.
I grew up at a time in the mid-90s, the late 90s. Pop culture was synonymous with white culture.
Matthew R. Morris has been a middle school teacher in Toronto for more than a decade. As a black man, he says bringing his own experience to the classroom can make a big difference for his students. Matthew R. Morris on learning who he was, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. Threats against Canadian politicians are costing taxpayers more than ever before. And it's not just the Prime Minister who's being targeted. MPs also need security. Elizabeth Thompson has the details in this CBC News exclusive.
It started with the pandemic, then the convoy protest that descended on Ottawa 2 years ago. Life has changed for many members of Parliament, from all parties. Online threats, people showing up at their homes, verbal harassment at public events.
What the you doing in Alberta?
It has also changed for the people who help keep them safe. Pierre-Yves Bourgeois is a former Deputy Commissioner with the RCMP.
5 years ago was a different world than it is today, and I'm sure you can appreciate that the more polarization you're seeing in Canadian politics, the more there's overt threats against different parties.
CBC News has learned the result has been record costs for the RCMP to provide security for MPs. Not counting the Prime Minister, 2 years ago the force spent $1.8 million to protect MPs. By the end of December, the RCMP says it had cost $2.5 million. If the current level of spending continues, it's on track to hit $3.4 million for this fiscal year. Police are not revealing who gets security. Former Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino doesn't think it's a temporary blip.
I do think that we are now living in an era where we are beset with disinformation and propaganda and foreign interference and cyber attacks and transnational repression, all of which makes for a very complicated threat environment.
If so, the cost of protecting Canada's MPs may continue to rise, along with the bill for taxpayers. Elizabeth Thompson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Liberal MP Ken MacDonald says he thinks it's time for his party to consider a leadership review of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Newfoundland MP stopped short of saying Trudeau should step down, but he did tell Radio-Canada this.
People are maybe thinking it's time for a change. I mean, I tell everybody, every leader, every party has a best before date. Our best before date is here.
MacDonald was first elected in 2015. He says he believes Trudeau helped him get elected, but now...
I think in Atlantic Canada is much the same as the rest of the country. There's almost a hatred out there right now for Prime Minister Trudeau.
MacDonald has whipped up controversy in the Liberal ranks before. Last fall, he voted in favor of a Conservative motion to abolish carbon pricing, one of the Trudeau government's flagship policies. The road is nearly clear for Donald Trump. The former U.S. president had a decisive win last night in the New Hampshire primary. That puts Trump closer to becoming the Republican nominee for president. His only opponent, Nikki Haley, remains in the race. As the CBC's Paul Hunter reports, the former South Carolina governor is promising to keep up the fight.
I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight.
But, said Nikki Haley, she's not finished yet, conceding New Hampshire, but for now staying in the contest to be the Republican Party nominee for the White House this fall.
This race is far from over.
Challenging last night's winner over an issue that's dogged President Joe Biden as well, age. Trump is 77. Haley last night added 3 years to that for Trump in underlining for her supporters she represents change.
The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Whoa.
None of it fazed Trump, who, as expected, won yesterday's primary and, in so doing, made his eventual Republican Party nomination all but certain.
Just a little note to Nikki. She's not going to win. She's not going to win.
The next big primary is South Carolina next month, Haley's home state, but a place where Donald Trump currently enjoys a comfortable lead in the polls. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Manchester, New Hampshire.
Russia says a military transport plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has crashed. Video posted online shows the plane exploding in a fireball in the Russian region of Belgorod, near Ukraine. Russian officials say all 74 people on board died. The aircraft was reportedly carrying the prisoners of war to the border for an exchange. It is not clear what caused the crash. Russia's foreign ministry says Ukraine shot the plane down. So far, Ukraine has not commented. The Northwest Territories Coroner's Office will give an update today on a plane crash near Fort Smith. The plane went down yesterday morning. We don't know yet how many people were on board and if there were survivors. Fort Smith's Deputy Mayor, Diana Carroll, says the community is grieving.
Everybody has somebody that they know, or it's very devastating, and families are grieving, and we just hope that everybody has the strength to carry on and get through this tragedy.
Mining company Rio Tinto says a number of its staff were on board. The plane was bound for its Diavik mine, 300 kilometers northeast of Yellowknife. The U.S. military says it carried out more airstrikes in Yemen in the early hours this morning, and it says it destroyed 2 more Houthi anti-ship missiles aimed at the Red Sea. CENTCOM says those missiles were a threat to the U.S. Navy and merchant vessels. Houthi attacks have disrupted global shipping since late November. The Iran-backed Houthis say their attacks are in solidarity with Palestinians in the Israel-Hamas war. Some members of the James Smith Cree Nation say their experience on a tragic day in their community is being ignored. The inquest into Canada's worst mass stabbing is in its 2nd week now. A jury has been hearing about how first responders handled the emergency. But as Sam Samson reports, First Nation responders say they're being left out of the inquest process.
We stayed until they took the last deceased body away.
Cindy Ghostkeeper Whitehead did not stop working on September 4th, 2022. She's a member of James Smith Cree Nation's crisis response team, trained in first aid, suicide prevention, and grief support. It's a team that helped sort through the chaos of the stabbings.
We had the lady that was in charge of the crisis response team, we had her coordinating help for the families.
But none of that team's efforts are being heard by the inquest jury, since none of them are testifying. Health Director Mike Marion says his staff gave CPR to victims and brought stabbing survivors to the triage center for paramedic treatment.
I think it's frustrating because we want the jury to know that we were part of this.
This inquest requires a jury make recommendations to prevent future violence. So far, they've heard how RCMP and paramedics responded to the mass casualty. Marion worries without hearing from First Nations staff, the jury won't include them in solutions.
I hope some good recommendations come out how we can support each other, because I think that's where it has to start.
The coroner's service says the witness list for the inquest was developed by the council representing James Smith Cree Nation. One chief for the First Nation says he'd still like to see more community members as witnesses. This inquest is scheduled to continue for another week and a half. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
Ontario does not have enough foster homes. Spaces at licensed treatment centres are limited. That is forcing high-risk kids to stay in some unusual places, sometimes for months at a time. Now, one children's aid provider is speaking out about the problem. The CBC's Dan Takema has the story.
It's often a hotel, an Airbnb. We've used cottages.
Carrie Jacked is a frontline worker at Highland Shores Children's Aid in Belleville, Ontario, where a youth has been bouncing between rented rooms since November. It's not even the most unusual arrangement she's heard of.
Some of my peers have talked about having to repurpose conference rooms and make them bedrooms for children.
The Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies calls that sort of stay a last resort, but says it's increasingly hearing about a lack of placement options. Jacked agrees.
It feels like we are desperate to find places for kids.
Part of the problem is a shortage of foster homes. Vanessa Milley from the Foster Parent Society of Ontario says many shut down during the pandemic, and retiring parents also aren't being replaced. She says kids being forced to stay in hotels has become a bigger issue.
We also understand it's happening across Canada and even in the U.S. sometimes.
Social workers in Montreal are reporting similar concerns. Governments in Alberta and BC have set aside tens of millions of dollars to address the issue. Ontario's government says it's doing the same. But
it's an unreasonable situation to be in.
At Highland Shores, Executive Director Jess Uddenberg says he worries about what the ongoing problem means for the kid in their care.
You're trying to support them, create some sort of family-based feeling, but you can't really do a lot of home-cooked meals on a kitchenette.
Dan Takema, CBC News, Belleville, Ontario.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio. This is CBC on your morning show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. It's going to be mild in Winnipeg today. Your forecast in a moment. This hour on the program, we're going to hear why a Manitoba man says the recent court ruling calling the government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act unreasonable feels like vindication to him. Stay tuned. We're going to hear his perspective. Also, it's called a gearhead's paradise by many. And now it's the name of our stadium, the home of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Princess Auto Stadium. But what is the history of Princess Auto? It has long roots. Born here in Winnipeg. We're going to hear more about that. And to serious matters at 10 to 8 this morning, a march is now being planned for 19-year-old Afolabi Stephen Opaso, the international student from Nigeria who was shot by police and killed earlier this year. On New Year's Eve, correctly. The march is happening this weekend. We're going to hear from one of the organizers about what they hope comes from coming together in this way. So that's coming up before 8. Right now, 7:11 a.m. is your time on your Wednesday morning. Let's go to Heather Wells with headlines.
Good morning. Well, the ex-wife of a man killed by Winnipeg police nearly 5 years ago is questioning why it's taken so long for an inquest. Machar Madut was fatally shot in February 2019. Manitoba's chief medical officer called an inquest into his death that same year. Still, no hearings have been held, and the family says they need closure. People inside one of Winnipeg's biggest shelters were forced out by carbon monoxide yesterday. Emergency crews were called to the Main Street project. Firefighters had to get everyone out of the shelter and into a transit bus. They ventilated the building, and 2 people were rushed to hospital. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
To the weather now with Abby Adiyemi.
Winnipeg is waking up to cloudy skies with risk of freeze and drizzle. We're sitting at -2 degrees with southbound winds, and of course we'll be seeing a high of -1 today for commuters. Because of the freeze and drizzle, it's wise to give yourself extra time.
And Corey is about to tell us why.
Yeah, a few things to keep an eye out for there. Let's start with the highways. Heard very slippery around Highway 12 on Highway 1 westbound. A few semis in the ditch. Got calls from Jackie earlier today. Heard about a jackknife semi right between Enola and Dugald there. So between Highway 12 and Highway 206, blocking almost the entirety of Highway number 1 westbound. People were able to sneak by on the right by going around the shoulder. But that is this is as of about half an hour ago. I got that tip. So maybe that is cleaned up. Would love to get an update on that. But as you can imagine, that is slowing down traffic quite a bit. Westbound Highway number 1 between Enola and Dugald. And finally, just got a call from David who said eastbound Nairn just past Ray is actually entirely blocked right now by emergency crews that were attending to a fire at a bus. So we don't know any other details about what caused that fire, or if what any of the issues were with the bus or who was on the bus, anything like that. We're still waiting on those details right now. So just a heads up, looks like that fire is out, but the crew is tending to that. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's begin with the ruling that came out yesterday. A federal judge found that the use of the Emergencies Act during the convoy protest was unreasonable. The government invoked the never-before-used legislation in February 2022 to clear thousands of protesters who had occupied downtown Ottawa for weeks. They were upset with the country's COVID-19 pandemic response, including vaccine mandates. After the ruling, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland spoke to reporters and said the government disagrees with the decision and plans to appeal.
I would just like to take a moment to remind Canadians of how serious the situation was in our country when we took that decision. The public safety of Canadians was under threat. Our national security, which includes our national economic security, was under threat. It was a hard decision to take. We took it very seriously after a lot of hard work, after a lot of careful deliberation. We were convinced at the time, I was convinced at the time, it was the right thing to do. It was the necessary thing to do. I remain, and we remain, convinced of that.
For some Manitobans, the new court ruling from Ottawa feels like vindication. Here in Winnipeg, a similar protest was taking place in front of the ledge, as you might recall. Eric Fleury was one of the many people that participated. He spent more than 2 weeks living in an RV while he protested. And as he spoke to CBC's Chidi Akuma about it, he said he hopes the ruling forces all Manitobans to reconsider how they view that moment in time.
It's validation for all of us that stood up for the rights and freedoms of Canadians across this country. I think that as time goes on, that more and more of the truth will come out. And it's a small victory for the thousands of Canadians that stood up against the tyranny of this Liberal government.
And when the Emergency Act was called, how did that impact protesters?
Well, I mean, we had a choice to make as protesters. You know, a lot of us were putting our entire lives on the line to stand up for those who didn't have a voice, for those who couldn't take the time off work or spend that time away from their jobs. And, you know, for me personally, I felt it was my duty, being able to do that, to spend that time, you know, the 3+ weeks or whatever it was downtown, to stand up for the people who couldn't. I mean, I had 30 people that I was representing that were working for a living every day that believed what I believed. A news program here where it's Chrystia Freeland was still standing behind this atrocity against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which has now been proven in a court of law, still trying to weasel her way, you know, past it. But the fact is, we all knew this was the case from day one. That's why we were there. And I think history will prove that it takes people that are brave to stand up and say, no, I'm pretty excited about the future, and I would hope that this change continues, and thank God for that. I guess it was a justice or judge, whatever it was, that came out and did the right thing.
That's Eric Fleury, who was one of the anti-mandate protesters at the Ledge here in Winnipeg during the convoy protests 2 years ago.
Forget your fancy indoor rinks, you Bonspiel newbies. Ironman outdoor curling is for those who hurry hard to curl on the frozen river.
Why are you talking like that?
I'm making the Ironman outdoor curling promo sound tougher.
But it's basically a fun spiel on the ice that everyone will enjoy. February 2nd to 4th. CBC is a proud sponsor.
Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more. Sorry, Janet.
I'm emceeing the opening. Maybe I should try to toughen up my voice for that. Right now, let's turn our attention to some developing issues in traffic. And just a small clarification, Corey?
Yeah, so got an update from Andrew that the highway on Highway number 1 there, that jackknife semi is still there between it's Highway 1 westbound between number 12 and Highway 206. And yeah, clarification, it's just between Highway 12 and Highway 206. I said earlier between Enola and Dougal. It's not. That's on Highway 15. It is just between Highway number 1 and Highway 206, so closer to Dufresne, Manitoba, if that helps. Westbound, jackknife heavy, stay right, really slow going there as people try to creep around there on the shoulder. Give me a call if you see anything else. Thanks for that update, Andrew. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey. And thanks for the updates, everyone. It is a little bit slick out there, especially on highways. That's because we're mild in temperature. So we always get one without the other. One's great and one gets trickier. So it's -2 right now. Well, next, before we actually talk about sports this morning, let's talk about the home of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and their new name. IG Field is now Princess Auto Stadium. Gearheads unite. Princess Auto has reached a 10-year sponsorship deal with the Bombers. Now, the tool and equipment company has 50 retail stores across Canada, but the roots are here in Winnipeg, and it's being touted as a Manitoba success story that started 90 years ago. Bill Redekop knows all about it because he has written the book on it. He's a retired Winnipeg Free Press reporter and author. His new book, The Princess Auto Story, comes out later this year. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you actually had an immediate response when you saw that the stadium was being renamed, right?
Well, yeah, I did. I was just so, I think, proud, really, of this local company and how far it had come now to have its name go national like this.
You tweeted out. What did you tweet out?
I tweeted, I think it was Bravo, something,
Something to that effect, yeah.
Well, yeah, it was just about, it started with 3 vehicles in the back of a building on Princess Street. That's where the name comes from. It started on Princess Street. And it was a little brick building, and the Tallman families took it over in the 1940s, and it still had a dirt floor inside. And from those beginnings, it has now, it's this, it has a stadium named after it.
Yeah. How many employees do they have now?
3,500 across the country. But its home office is here in Winnipeg, of course.
So I overheard in the newsroom yesterday, someone, and I thought this was a great line, so I'm full on stealing it from Megan Ketchison. She was talking about, I believe it was Megan, said, Princess Auto to Gearheads is almost like an IKEA. Like, it's like, wow. Can you explain, why it's iconic for people a little bit? You talk about its history in the book, yeah?
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because it is like there's a Princess Auto nation out there. One of the things I think, and, one way to distinguish Princess Auto from other sort of tool type stores, do-it-yourselfer stores, is Princess Auto is in metal, and the other store is kind of more in lumber. And so in Princess Auto, you get the real hardcore guys, the guys who really know, who can really build stuff. Well, build stuff with metal, of course, which is a little more difficult. And so, the IKEA thing, it's partly that it's so original that there was no model that had developed itself on. It found the model, and now it's being copied in the U.S., but it discovered this market and these people and these customers and these products for them on its own, just slowly developing into what it is today.
In the 80s, in part of the history that you share and you've learned about, it had a profit-sharing program, is that right?
Yeah, it started a profit-sharing program when that was just unheard of. And this was back in the late 1980s. And they wanted to have, better service, but they also wanted to have happy, workers. And so they started a profit sharing, and it is paid out every year, and it pays out on average about 7 weeks' salary to everybody at the end of the year. But some years it's gone way higher. Some years, a couple years, it's been almost half a year's salary paid out in a profit sharing. It's an amazing program.
The Tallmans, you mentioned the family behind it, were also avid football fans, I understand. Is that right? What do we know about that?
Oh, fanatics, yeah. Well, Bob Tallman, who was the principal owner of Princess Auto for 30 years until about 2018, I believe, him and his dad would watch every game together, and Bob has had season tickets and everything. And Harvey Tallman, who is the patriarch of the company, he died just last year at age 99. But he was really sort of the founder back in 1942 when he took over this failing auto wrecking business at the age of 19. He was just 19.
There aren't a lot of head offices left in Winnipeg, Bill. Of course, we have some. Why do you think Princess Auto, given how large it grew to, as you said, 3,500 employees, 50 locations, why do you think they've kept their roots in Winnipeg, just given that you know so much about their history?
It's just, I'm not sure. I think they've had many opportunities to move. They've had many offers to buy them out, and they could have made a ton of money. Just say, okay, someone else can take over this company, and then they'll move the head office and blah, blah, blah. But, they like running a company. And let me give you one example. Like, they had this offer. Well, I think one thing we really want to say is that the owners today, Bob's sons, Matt and Mark, like this stadium naming is sort of demonstrates their commitment to stay in Winnipeg because it's a 10-year agreement. So this shows their long-term vision that they're going to stay here. I don't think there's any doubt that they want to move. But I mean, they have countless offers to purchase them. And one was from a very large company. I don't think they want me to say the name, out of Atlanta, Georgia. And a guy showed up in a limousine, walked into the office. Bob sat across from Bob, and he said, "I'm going to buy your company today." Bob said, "Okay, well, what do you got?" And the guy slid his card across the table with a figure on the inside. Mm-hmm. And Bob flipped it over, and it was like it was an astronomical figure. It was 3 times the amount that it was valued at. And Bob said no. And he said, "No, I just don't want to sell." And the guy cussed him and walked out.
Bill Redekop, we'll wait for the Princess Auto story, your book on this to come out. When do you expect it could be out?
Late March.
All right, looking forward to that.
It went to the printer yesterday, actually.
Oh, perfect timing to have the convo. Thank you very much for being on this morning. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
It's Bill Redekop, former reporter with the Winnipeg Free Press, author of the book The Princess Auto Story. So we are told fans can expect to see the new signage on the stadium in mid-April, heading into the CFL season. So let's keep talking sports. Scott Regeres here. Hello.
Hey, Marcy.
So let's turn our attention to hockey. What are you going to watch tonight for as the Jets take on Toronto?
Well, first to see if Mark Scheifele and Gabriel Velarde will be good to go, Marcy. Both missed the last game with lower body injuries. The encouraging sight for Jets fans is that even though it was only an optional skate yesterday, not a full practice, both Scheifele and Velarde were out in regular practice jerseys. Head coach Rick Bowness still described both players as day-to-day, saying they will be reevaluated later on today. The other thing to look for is if the Jets can break out of their power play slump. They're a bottom 10 team in that regard. Speaking after the loss to the Bruins earlier this week, Bowness said some of the woes were due to missing players from the top unit.
You know, one thing with the power play you got to keep in mind is we have never had a chance to work Mark, Casey, and Gabe together. We haven't. One of them's been hurt the whole time. I think when we finally get a chance to put Mark, Gabe, and Casey on the same unit, I think it'll turn around. It's something we're just going to have to stay on top of.
Casey being Kyle Connor, of course. Because of injuries, that trio's only spent 8 games together. Regardless of if all 3 will be available tonight, the Jets should be in a pretty good position to score at least 1 power play goal. And I say that because the Leafs are one of the worst in the league in that regard, the penalty kill. So we'll have to wait and see. Puck drop is at 6 o'clock.
So it has been a banner season for Canadian NHL teams so far, but who's standing above the rest?
You know, with respect to the Jets and the Canucks, who have both at various points led the league standings, the team that's incredibly hot at the moment are the Oilers, who won over Columbus last night, a 14th straight victory. No Canadian team, Marcy's, ever won so many games in a row. Not the Guy Lafleur-led Habs of the 70s, not the Gretzky-led Oilers juggernauts of the 80s. Maybe the biggest contributor to Edmonton's recent success is their goalie Stuart Skinner, whose win last night was his 11th straight, meaning he surpasses the great Grant Fuhr for the club record. And Skinner was asked what that meant.
It means a lot. I was feeling a lot of emotion, especially when I went out on the ice for the first star there, just because it's pretty cool being able to break a record from one of the best goalies to ever live. So obviously a guy that I look up to, a guy that I've talked to, and I've watched every single YouTube video possible on him, from his interviews to his incredible saves. So it's a very cool feeling.
The Skinner-Fuhr comparison, not the only one with the Oilers' 80s dynasty. Connor McDavid plays a pretty good Gretzky, Leon Draisaitl, Messier, and Evan Bouchard, Paul Coffey. So lots to be excited about, especially if they win their next 4 in a row. That would set the NHL record currently held by the Penguins, who set that mark in '93, led by some guy named Lemieux.
Some dude. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Maybe he played a season. Let's end with Melbourne. Back to the Aussie Open. They are determining the semifinalists.
Yeah, Ottawa's Gabby Dabrowski and her partner, Montreal-raised Erin Routliffe, have made it through to the women's doubles semifinals. Then you have Rohan Bopanna, Marcy. He is a former partner of Dabrowski's in mixed doubles, and another Canadian, Denis Shapovalov, in men's doubles. And Bopanna is now the top-ranked doubles player in the world, which is incredible considering he's 43 years old, the oldest number 1 ever in any tennis category.
Now at this juncture, for me to get to world number 1, I mean, it still hasn't sunk in fully, to be honest, but very, very proud. Indian tennis, India needed this. We don't really have many tennis players coming up. I think it's just going to inspire a lot of people. And I don't think just in tennis, people all over the world, being 40 and above, I think it's just going to inspire them in a different way.
Bopanna's beard is almost entirely gray now. He turns 44 right after the Aussie Open, and he credits his physiotherapist and daily yoga for his longevity. Too late to make New Year's resolutions? Or
Not at all. Love it.
Good.
Inspiring. All right, take care.
You too.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Highways are a bit slippery, and so watch out for that. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -2. Part of the reason highways are so slippery is it is so mild, and we do have a risk of freezing drizzle throughout the day. A high today of -1. The ex-wife of a man killed by Winnipeg police nearly 5 years ago is questioning why it's taken so long for an inquest. Matchwar Madut was fatally shot in February 2019. Manitoba's chief medical officer called an inquest into his death that same year. Still, no hearings have been held. Madut's former wife, Akul Yakdeng, says their 3 children need closure.
Your own dad is being killed, and 5 years later, you still don't have answer to it. So when is the life going to be better for you, for me?
The province says the case has a number of unique challenges. A hearing date has not been scheduled at this time. The RCMP says officer perception is being used to collect race-based data in their interactions with people. It's part of a pilot project that started 2 weeks ago in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. The goal, to help the RCMP address systemic racism. Mai Fan is the acting director of the RCMP's anti-racism unit. Fan says frontline officers have been told to use their observations to determine someone's race during arrests, wellness checks, and when there's use of force.
We also explain the value and the validity of perception data for understanding implicit biases, unconscious biases in decision making, and how this data will help us to improve our policies, our procedures, and our training.
The RCMP will collect race-based data for 1 year and then make it available to the public. The Mounties say the pilot is a test aimed at making improvements before an anticipated national rollout. One person is in critical condition at last word after a house fire in the 800 block of Lorette. When crews arrived just after 5 yesterday afternoon, heavy smoke was coming from the bungalow. Once they got inside, they found one person inside. That person was rushed to hospital. A dog was also found dead inside that
when
house.
she was in grade 12.
CBC News
he stood
has
trial
learned the
last
security
fall.
costs associated
Yesterday, the
with
judge said
protecting
he
our
wasn't
members of
convinced beyond a
Parliament
reasonable
are
doubt that
soaring. The numbers show this year's RCMP bill is projected to be close to double what it was just 2 years ago, which doesn't surprise former Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino.
I do think that we are now living in an era where we are beset with disinformation and propaganda and foreign interference and cyber attacks and transnational repression, all of which makes for a very complicated threat environment.
For the upcoming year, the cost for MP security is expected to top $3.4 million, and that doesn't include the Prime Minister's security costs. The RCMP won't say which MPs are receiving protection. The Kremlin says a military transport plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has crashed in western Russia. Video posted online appears to show the plane exploding in a fireball near the Ukraine border. There has been no official confirmation, but a Russian state news agency reports the aircraft was carrying POWs to the border for a prisoner exchange. The Russian Defense Ministry says a special military commission is on its way to the crash site. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. People inside one of Winnipeg's biggest shelters were forced out by carbon monoxide yesterday afternoon. Emergency crews were called to the Main Street project just before 6 last evening. Firefighters worked to get everyone out of the shelter and into a bus, ventilating the building. 2 people were rushed to hospital, one stable, the other unstable, although their injuries are not believed related to the carbon monoxide. It's thought the carbon monoxide was caused by diesel-fueled construction equipment inside the building. Well, people in St. Teresa's Point First Nation are anxiously waiting for temperatures to drop. They need colder temperatures so more winter roads can open. Some winter roads started opening last Friday, but many are still closed. St. Teresa Point Chief Raymond Flett wants more all-season roads for remote communities. Without them, he says they are at the mercy of the weather.
It's this weather, right? This trend, it's very warm weather. The road won't last because they just started packing and it's not really solid yet.
The rest of the winter road system will open between January 26th and February 9th. Winter roads make more than 2,500 shipments of goods possible every year. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather. It's 7:35 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. Let's get into what's going on in the forecast. First, Abby Adiemi joins us with the details on the day everyone's talking about.
Yeah, we're warming up. I'm just going to say we're warming up. That's what I will say. However, the city remains under that cloudy skies with a risk of freezing drizzle. The current temperature is actually at -2 degrees. And as we move into the day, expect the cloud cover to stick around. The southwind breeze will continue, but it will be light, and we will be seeing a high of -1 today. However, Winnipeg is currently at -2. Brandon is currently at -3, heading to a high of -2. Thompson -13, heading to a high of falling to -17. Churchill is at 23, partly cloudy over there, falling to -25. Gimli is currently at -2, heading to a high of -1. Dauphin is at -4, also risk of freezing drizzle over there, heading to a high of -3. Steinbach is at -2, heading to a high of -1, cloudy in the eastern part of the region. And Morris and the Pembina Valley region is currently at -2, heading to a high of -1.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into what's happening on the commute. It has been tricky. Corey's been a bit busy picking up the phones.
Yeah, one thing to keep an eye out, the biggest thing going on right now is that Jackknife Semi, Highway 1 West, between Highway 1 behind Highway 12 and Highway 206. It's right around the Dufresne kind of area, so look out for that. Heard earlier from Andrew that was still the case. This was about 15 minutes ago I heard from. That is blocking pretty much the entirety of Highway 1 westbound. You can people are sneaking around it by going on the shoulder on the right, but people are really slowing down because it is very slippery on the highway, as you can imagine right now. So that is causing some backups on Highway number 1, and just Highway 1 around the number 12 turnoff there is very slippery as well. Heard about a few semis actually in the ditch earlier from Jackie. So just be very careful if you are hitting Highway 1, particularly around that turnoff to Highway 12 this morning. One other thing to keep an eye on here in the city, Nairn eastbound, there were firefighters tending to a fire at a bus. We don't have any other details about what was going on that bus or any other details on that issue at all. All we know is that it was blocking pretty much the entirety of Nairn eastbound just past Ray. So be careful if you are approaching that. You probably want to find another route if you're heading Nairn eastbound. That may still be a problem. I'd love to get an update on what folks are seeing there on that part of the road. Other than that, if you see anything else going on out there on the roads, on the highways, would love to get updates. I'll let your fellow listeners know. The number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Corey Funk with our commute update. Busy one this morning. Take it easy out there. Well, next on the show, we have a really nice story to share. A local business is giving back to their community in a unique way. Once Upon a Child is a store that buys and sells gently used kids' clothes for more affordable prices. Now, today, the store is hosting a Take What You Need event, so people can pick up winter clothing for their kids for free. Caleb Rondo is a manager at Once Upon a Child Winnipeg store on Ellis and is with us via Zoom. Hi.
Hi there.
So tell me a little bit about what you're planning today.
Yeah, so today is our Take What You Need event. So for the past 9 years, we've been really on a mission to give back to our community. We've donated clothes to daycares, to local charitable organizations, and we're always looking for new ways to do it. So our first Take What You Need event was back in the summer, where we put bins of clothing out just outside of our store that were just free for anyone in the community who might be in need to take. It was a big success in the summer, so we decided to do it again this winter with fall and winter apparel this time.
When you say a big success, what did it feel like as the people came and realized this is something that they could, get for their families?
Yeah, so it felt really nice to see the people who they just might be with the high cost of living, it's so difficult to afford kids. They're so expensive. So when they were able to come in and see that there was good quality clothing that they could get for free, it was really nice. And there was also a really good spirit of generosity there because we really encourage people to just take what they need, make sure that they leave stuff for others. And everyone was really respectful of that. And it worked really well.
Did anyone share any stories for you or say anything as they were picking items out of the bin like, oh, I got, I don't know, this for my child. They've been needing this or...
Yeah, there were people who were super excited because I mean there was even like name brand clothing that they might not normally be able to get, like Calvin Klein, like Nike, that kind of stuff, for shorts and t-shirts in the summer. Now this time they're going to be able to grab long sleeves, sweaters, pants, all that kind of stuff. So
why are you doing this? You said to respond to a need in our community. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so especially here in Winnipeg, in the winter, we have such cold winters, so the demand for winter clothing is always so high in our community. And with the high cost of living right now, it can be a struggle for some people. So we've been in the community now for 9 years, and we think that it's really important that we're able to give back to our customers because they are what helps make us such a success.
So you said winter clothing today. How much do you put out? I know it starts at 9. Should someone come right away, or will it happen through the day and you replenish the supply? How will this work?
So we're going to put out, we're going to set up a whole bunch of bins outside. A lot of what we've got is the infant clothing, so 0 to 12 months. We've also got clothing size 10 and up. I would recommend to come as early in the day as you can, just because we don't know how much people are going to need to take and how long it's going to last. I think that last year we had clothing out for a couple of hours. But yeah, we've got a decent amount of supply, a lot in the infant sizes in particular.
You were talking about, what we've all been talking about, which is the high cost of living and inflation. I mean, the past few years have been really difficult for people. How has it impacted what you see in the store?
Yeah, so I think buying secondhand has never been more popular. It's a great way to save some money and also still get good quality clothing for less, especially with the high cost of living, like you said right now.
Yeah. Has the demand for clothes, especially you mentioning winter baby clothing, changed over the years? Have you seen a change in who's buying what at the store?
Yeah, so the store's been open for 9 years. I've been on the team for 7 of them. So it's been definitely a big shift. We're finding we're getting more and more new customers every day who are coming to learn about how to sell to us because they're able to recycle their clothing that way, do a trade, and just buying we sell stuff for up to 70% less than the retail cost. So it's a great way to save.
Well, thank you for coming on Zoom this morning, Caleb, and telling us all about it. I'll share your address and appreciate hearing all about what you're doing in community.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you. That's Caleb Rondo, manager with us via Zoom at Once Upon a Child in Winnipeg. That is the Winnipeg West location. So they're having their free event today with winter clothing, specifically, for all ages of kids and such, but they have a lot of infant clothing, I just want to mention. So 1330 Ellis, and it starts at 9.
Just how does a plant become illegal? Terry O'Reilly is one toke over the line, leaving no stone unturned, exploring the history of cannabis and how it's marketed. From high-end retail stores now selling expensive paraphernalia to celebrities who have their own brands. On Under the Influence, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
7:44 a.m. is the time right now, and we got 1 week left in January. Can you believe it? Doesn't feel like it today, temperature-wise. Our high is going to be -1. Doesn't feel like January, that is. This risk of freezing drizzle, though, some fog patches expected out there, and just general conditions with ice right now, because we're around that 0 mark, causing some issues on the highways. So specifically Highway 1 and Highway 12 westbound around the Steinbach turnoff. We've heard of some issues there. Also, Nairn eastbound at Ray, there's a problem out that way as well. We understand firefighters are on scene tending to an issue. So please call us if you have any updates on those situations or others. 788-3093. Well, as you heard in the news, we have a CBC exclusive interview coming up after 8 o'clock. In 2019, an inquest was called into the death of a South Sudanese man who was killed by police in Winnipeg, Machwar Madut. In an exclusive interview, the man's ex-wife is speaking out for the first time, and her name is Akulyak Dang. I spoke with her at length, and here's why she said she's going public today.
I want to fight for justice for my husband and for my kids too. They need to know what happened to their dad so that they can move on with life, knowing the truth about what went down 5 years ago.
So 5 years ago, as she said, the family says they're still waiting for answers. They still are wondering what is happening with an inquest. And they're going to talk about, she will share what has been happening with her family and with the kids that she was co-parenting with Machwar Madut before he was killed, and how they're doing. So stay tuned. That interview is coming up after 8 o'clock right here on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and you are listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, on YouTube, or here on the radio with us as well. Next on the show, we're just talking about an inquest from 5 years ago, turning to current issues. There's a march now being planned to honor an international student from Nigeria who was also killed by Winnipeg police. He was killed on New Year's Eve. On Saturday, people are expected to gather at Union Station on Main Street and walk to the Manitoba Legislative Building. Organizers say the goal is to demand justice for a 19-year-old Afolabi Opaso, who was said to be having a mental health crisis when he was shot by police, again on New Year's Eve. Titi Tajani is with us, president of the African Communities of Manitoba, Inc., to talk about the march coming up. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well, tell me.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about what you're hoping, what the purpose is of the march on Saturday here.
Well, thank you. So the purpose of this march is to demand for justice for Afolabi Opaso and also accountability from the Winnipeg Police Service. We are asking for Winnipeggers to join us and call for the end to police brutality, police racial profiling of people of color, particularly Black people, unequal treatment of people of color as well, and mistreatment to other visible minority groups.
How many? Do you have a sense, TD, of how many people you're expecting?
I don't have a number, but we are expecting a large crowd. We are expecting a large crowd to support because I'm sure Winnipeggers, are against police brutality, and we're calling for this particularly because also of the mental health crisis, and I'm sure, we want to highlight the need for more support for mental health as well.
Why is it important for you personally to be part of this demonstration and march on the weekend?
Well, I've been in Winnipeg for a long time, and I have seen the issues that have happened in the past. You just mentioned the issue 5 years ago when Madut was killed, also because they called for help for him because he was having a mental health crisis. I mean, this is 5 years ago. And in 2024, we're still dealing with the same thing. When is this going to stop?
The story has made a lot of headlines, the death of Afolabi Opaso. How do you have concerns at all about the possibility that that there could be tension at this rally on the weekend?
Well, we are asking. I don't expect tension because, in fact, I'm commending our community for the way they have, the restraint they have displayed and the leadership they've displayed during this phase of tragedy over the past few weeks or so. And we are asking everyone that wants to come to the rally to remain calm and peaceful while we demand for justice and accountability. So we have expressed that throughout our community, and I think many people know now that we want to be respectful of the law while we make our demands and let our voices be heard.
How comfortable were people to, get on board and take part in this and say they wanted to come together around this, what happened to this 19-year-old? Were some people hesitant to demonstrate in this way in your community?
No, because this is a child. He's 19 years old, and he's a child. And we all have children. And if this can happen to him when his friends call for help, if help will turn into him being killed, everybody is afraid. Many people are afraid. Is it going to be my turn next time? And we should not be afraid to call for help. And so that's part of why we're doing the rally. A call for help should not be the death sentence for anyone. And so, yes, people want to come out and show solidarity in protesting about this particular incident and for it to stop.
What do you hope that people understand from this? Obviously, you said it's a call for justice. It's to try and seek some more accountability, get more information about what happened on New Year's Eve. But what do you help people learn or understand or take away from this?
I think people need to remember that we are a society where, where our population is increasing. There is, unfortunately, more incidents of mental health that's happening. And symptoms of mental health is this. When people have mental health crisis, they behave in such a certain way. And so we want, part of what we're asking is for the police to have not police, but we want the people in power to have a civilian-led crisis responders without the police. The current act that we have now, is still police-led. And so if police is leading, guns are there. And so if we can remove guns and have people that are trained in mental health to be able to de-escalate and get help for people that are in crisis, that will prevent more deaths.
So, TD, are you asking that change of the premier and the justice minister? To be clear, you're looking for a change, a fundamental change, and you said you're not necessarily looking to ask police that, but other leaders.
Yes, we are asking, the justice minister, people in the city, the mayor, all of them to look into changing that. We do not want a system whereby police is leading a response to a mental health crisis. It should be people that are trained, not the police, no guns.
Have you put that? Have you had any response? I mean, have you had any conversations directly with any of the leadership so far?
Those are still being planned. And yes, those are still being planned. There will be ongoing conversation moving forward. And while this investigation is going on, and we're not going to stop asking for a change. Like you said, 5 years ago this happened. We protested. We want to stop. No more protest because we want change to happen.
Thank you for being with us this morning, TD. Anything I did not ask that you'd like to say?
Again, I just want to remind everybody we are asking for volunteers to help with the rally, make posters, and if people want to volunteer, they can call 204-808-6649. And we're also accepting donations that can be made to ACOMI, that's the African Communities of Manitoba, at www.acomi.ca. That's ACOMI.ca. And just Justice for Afolabi.
And for clarity, the donations will be used for what?
For the rally.
For the rally, to help organize.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
To help organize the rally, the posters, and the marches. And yes.
Thank you very much for being on CBC.
Thank you very much.
That's Titi Tajani, president of the African Communities of Manitoba, Inc. If you want more information about their rally, 808-6649 is the number shared here. They are planning a march that's happening on Saturday. That's at 2:30. It starts at Union Station. It ends at the Manitoba Legislature. We did reach out to Chief Danny Smythe for an interview specifically about Winnipeg Police and use of force. Of course, we've been doing a series of interviews as we seek to understand more about not just the relationship between communities and police, but the deaths and the cases we're talking about. Our request for an interview on that topic was declined.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It's 5 to 8 right now, and the traffic might be a challenge out there because of iciness, especially on the highways. We've heard from Southeast Man around the turnoff to Steinbach off Highway 1 to Highway 12. But I'll tell you what, everyone else is going to be walking around feeling pretty good this morning. You might even be able to be brave and pull your scarf down and just feel like you want to smile. Or maybe you want to sing. This song always makes me sing. I think this matches our weather forecast with the high of -1 in the city today. Here's William Prince and Serena Ryder. And sing me a song.
Yeah.
Sing me a song. It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just sing me a song.
Play me a song, babe.
What kind of song, babe?
The one that feels the closest to my touch. Play me a song, babe.
What if I get it wrong, babe?
It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just play me a song.
It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just play me a song. And I could play this guitar without any strings.
I could sing for hours about everything.
And that'd be alright by me. I could play this guitar without any strings,
And I could sing for hours about everything.
and that'd be alright by me. So sing me a song, babe.
What kind of song, babe?
The one you hear when you look into my soul. Sing me a song, babe.
What kind of song, babe?
It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just sing me a song. It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just sing me a song. It ain't gotta be good, it ain't gotta be long. Just sing me a song.
Serena Ryder and William Prince and Sing Me a Song. I really loved that, just to take the edge off of the serious issues in the world. Sometimes leaning into a tune like that really can have a little lift. All right, let's get into what's happening in the news. Back to headlines. It's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells joins us now with updates.
Good morning. Well, the ex-wife of a man killed by Winnipeg police nearly 5 years ago questions why it's taken so long for an inquest. Matcher Madut was fatally shot on February of 2019. Manitoba's chief medical officer called an inquest into his death that same year. Still no hearings have been held, and the family says they need closure. Relief for some remote Manitoba communities, as more than half of Manitoba's winter roads are now open, connecting dozens of isolated communities with the rest of the province. But other communities like St. Teresa Point are still waiting. Their Grand Chief is calling for more all-season roads for remote areas. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Risk of freezing drizzle today. High of -1, though. Hello. We do have issues on the commute. Corey?
Yeah, jackknife semi between highway number 1 westbound between Highway 12 and 206. Still a problem. And if you're thinking about taking 207 to get around, got a call from Connie who said there's actually emergency vehicles blocking part of 207 as well. Both ways, it appears, just after Dufresne. So that's also blocked. So heads up there. Very slippery in that area overall. So just be very careful. 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Well, after 8 o'clock, to build on Heather's lead in the news, we will have that exclusive interview with Matcher Madut's ex-wife. She's been co-parenting his children. She's been waiting 5 years for answers about why he was killed.
On Q with Tom Power.
The actor Jake Johnson rose to fame on the hit TV show New Girl. That led to some massive movie franchises like Jurassic World and Spider-Man. Jake will be here to tell you what it took to juggle writing, directing, producing, and starring in his new film, Self-Reliance.
Did you just ask if I was having fun?
Yes?
No!
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Matthew R. Morris has been a middle school teacher in Toronto for more than a decade. As a black man, he says bringing his own experience to the classroom can make a big difference for his students. Matthew R. Morris on learning who he was, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. The crash site is secured. Now investigators are trying to figure out what caused a plane to go down near Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories. We know there were fatalities, that the people on board were on their way to work at a diamond mine, but we will not know how many until later today. The CBC's Juanita Taylor now on how the community is coping.
The community is in shock. We're a very close-knit community.
Fort Smith's Deputy Mayor, Diana Carroll, took part in a prayer service last night at the Anglican Church to be with her community as they grieve for the lives lost in a tragic plane crash Tuesday morning.
Our thoughts and our hearts and our prayers are out to those who are all affected. I mean, everybody has somebody that they know, or, it's very devastating, and families are grieving, and we just hope that everybody has the strength to carry on and get through this tragedy.
In a news release, Rio Tinto confirmed the Northwestern Air Lease flight was on its way to bring workers to the Diavik diamond mine, about 500 kilometers from Fort Smith. Officials have not said how many people were on board the flight. Garth Eggenberger is the territory's chief coroner.
At this time, we're only
only saying that there are fatalities. We know there are fatalities, but we don't know how many. Once the team is on the ground and has visited the site, then they will let me know, and then we'll issue an official statement.
The Transportation Safety Board is sending a team of investigators to the crash site. For the people of Fort Smith and across the Northwest Territories, counseling services are being offered by the Health and Social Services Authority to help with the shock and pain being felt by so many people. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Rankin Inlet, Nunavut.
Russia says a military transport plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has crashed. Video posted online shows the plane exploding in a fireball in the Russian region of Belgorod near Ukraine. Russian officials say all 74 people on board have died. The aircraft was reportedly carrying the prisoners of war to the border for an exchange. It's not clear what caused the crash. Russia's foreign ministry says Ukraine shot the plane down. So far, Ukraine has not commented. Russian investigators are on their way to the crash site. Italy is mourning skiers who died in that heliski crash in northern BC earlier this week. Two of the three people who were killed were from prominent business families. Megan Williams has more on the young executives.
An outpouring of grief on social media and television in Italy for the two young Italians who died in the skiing accident. Both men came from the small German-speaking region of Trentino Alto Adige in northern Italy. Both were from families with successful businesses. 29-year-old Heiner Jr. Oberrauch was at the helm of the family sports apparel chain store Sportler, part of a family business dynasty that dates back almost 2 centuries. The family is also well known for its philanthropy, dedicating vegetable gardens for the elderly and supporting programs for young asylum seekers. Heiner's younger brother Jakob and brother-in-law Johannes Pier were injured in the crash but survived. The other Italian who died, 35-year-old Andreas Wiedmann, also helped run a family-owned sports gear business, Tex Market. His family played a prominent role in local politics. Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Antonio Tajani joined Italians, expressing his condolences for the death of the two men and wishing a speedy recovery for the others. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
It appears that the path to becoming the Republican presidential nominee has been cleared for Donald Trump. The former U.S. president easily took the New Hampshire primary against his only competitor, Nikki Haley. Steve Futterman is in New Hampshire and joins me now. And Steve, it was a big win for Donald Trump, but not exactly the numbers he was hoping for. Tell us about that.
Marcia, Donald Trump got his win, but it wasn't the 20 or 30 percentage points or even larger margin he wanted. He is going to win, but it looks like by only around 10 percentage points. Nikki Haley ends up in the 40% range, a good showing for her. And much to Trump's chagrin, she is going nowhere. Last night, she sounded as upbeat as ever.
Well, I'm a fighter. And today we got close to half of the vote. We still have a ways to go, but we keep moving up.
And she even poked at Trump, again raising his age and in a sense saying, put up or shut up.
I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me. If he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me.
Now, Trump and his campaign officials are still supremely confident he's going to get the nomination, but they want Haley to call it quits. Even though he was the victor last night, Trump was visibly annoyed at the way Haley reacted.
Let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night.
So, Steve, does this assure Trump versus Biden part 2?
Yes, it seems to. Even Joe Biden last night issued a statement indicating it's now clear there will be this rematch. Now, Scott Jennings is a former advisor to George W. Bush. He says this is clearly not appealing to the American people.
The American people don't want this rematch. I mean, let's just acknowledge that the parties have given us a helping of something off the menu that no one ordered.
But that's the meal they got. That's the meal that they're likely going to have to live with. And we're going to be talking about Trump versus Biden unless something unusual happens from now until November.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Marcia.
Freelance reporter Steve Futterman in New Hampshire. We are keeping a close eye on the Bank of Canada. The central bank will make its latest interest rate policy announcement later this hour. It is expected to leave interest rates unchanged. But as Peter Armstrong reports, there could be hints about where those rates are heading.
It's been a rough couple of years for Canadian households squeezed by rising prices and climbing interest rates. A mere 22 months ago, the Bank of Canada's key overnight lending rate was at 0.25%. Today, that rate stands at 5%. When last we heard from Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, he was asked why he couldn't be more clear about when rates were going to come down.
Right now, we're in a situation where we've held for 3 meetings. We're taking it one meeting at a time, and I think you just have to take that at face value.
Today's meeting is expected to make that 4 straight announcements without change. Economists say the bank is wary of declaring victory too soon and being forced to backtrack. But RBC economist Claire Fan says the bank's own economic forecasts make it clear inflation is coming back under control. Her projections show that by this time next year, the bank's key lending rate will have fallen 1 full percentage point. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
The clock is ticking for international students trying to make a living in Canada. In a few months, a cap will once again be placed on the number of hours they can work in a week. Now, many are wondering if they can afford to stay and study. The CBC's Karina Zapata has that story.
It was really, really hectic, and I just felt exhausted all the time.
Calgary international student Rohan Joshua worked roughly 60 hours a week to keep a roof over his head while he was in school. He calls himself one of the lucky ones, working full-time. Come April, the federal government is reinstating its 20-hour-a-week work cap for international students. Joshua just finished his one-year program, but he worries for his friends.
If they aren't able to work full-time, I don't know how they're going to manage.
It's why 7 Alberta students' associations and unions have come together. They're calling on Ottawa to lift the work cap for good. Celia Sutton, chair of the Alberta Students' Executive Council, says it's critical, considering affordability issues gripping much of the country.
At this point, it's more important than ever to ensure that we give them the best chance of success.
But Calgary Policy Studies professor Laurie Williams says she constantly sees how working too much impacts students.
It impoverishes their education. I've watched this get worse and worse over years.
Williams says instead, government should invest in affordable student housing and potentially lower tuition fees. Karina Zapata, CBC News, Calgary.
In New Brunswick, the coveted Chase the Ace jackpot has a winner.
Oui, monsieur, vous l'avez! Hey! 8,224,080 $. Vous êtes millionnaire 8 fois! Hey!
Danny and Muriel Robbins won more than $8.2 million. They picked the right envelope. It is believed to be one of the largest Chase the Ace wins in the country. Play on this game has been happening for nearly a year. The couple went in on a ticket with their son and his girlfriend. They say they don't know what they'll do with their newfound fortune, and they cannot believe their luck. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio live in downtown Winnipeg. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app or on YouTube. We are everywhere. It is mild this morning, but we do have some icy conditions that the mild weather is causing in the commute. So we'll hear all about that in a moment. Also, this half hour on the program, we have an exclusive interview. In 2019, an inquest was called into the death of a South Sudanese man killed by police. 5 years later, his family says they are still waiting for answers. Now, for the first time, the ex-wife of Machwar Madut is going to speak publicly about his death. So we had an exclusive interview with her. I spoke with her at great length. You're going to hear part of what she shared in this half hour about how the family has been impacted and how it's been waiting 5 years. Stay tuned. Let's get into what's going on otherwise in news. Heather Wells joins us with headlines.
Good morning. Well, the co-founder of a Winnipeg-based de-escalation team supports the collection of race-based data by RCMP. 2 weeks ago, the Mounties started a pilot project in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. People's races are collected by officers during arrests, wellness checks, or when there is use of force. Daniel Hidalgo at Saw Bay Peace Walkers says he's had negative interactions with police in the past. He feels it's due in part to the way he looks, and that's why he says he supports this initiative. We're going to hear more from him coming up. And the city of Winnipeg has filed separate lawsuits against 2 vacant property owners this month for allegedly racking up about $20,000 each in unpaid inspection bills and other fees. We'll hear about that as well in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi, let's talk forecast.
Let's talk forecast. As we approach the rush hour, the city is still under that influence of cloudy skies, and the lingering risk of freeze and drizzle will definitely continue all through the day. The current temperature remains steady at -2 degrees. Our high for today will reach around -1, and as we go into the night, we're anticipating continued cloud cover with that risk of freezing drizzle. Now, fog patches, the one I mentioned I saw coming in this morning, will definitely reappear tonight, and the overnight low is expected to be around -4. If we look ahead into tomorrow with a tip for just as you prepare for the day, it's going to be mainly cloudy with a risk of that freezing drizzle in the morning, and then the wind will be bringing the temperature to reach like -2 degrees. But right now, Winnipeg is currently at -2.
Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Scott just called the traffic line. He said eastbound Portage Avenue in front of Deer Lodge Hospital in the second lane, there is a stalled vehicle. So thank you for calling. We've also had other calls, Corey Funk.
Yeah, a few stalled vehicles, which I'll let folks know about shortly. But first, I want to start with the highways. Thanks for grabbing that call, by the way, Marcy, for me. Team effort over here. All morning, Highway number 1 between Highway 12 and Highway 206, pretty much right between there. There's been a jackknife semi blocking the westbound Highway number 1. People are able to get around it by going right on the shoulder, but it's very slippery and people really have to slow down to get around it. And as you can imagine, that is causing some backups. Also heard that Highway 207, people might think, hey, maybe I can go around with there. There's actually a bunch of emergency vehicles there blocking both ways as well. So it looks like there's perhaps some kind of incident they're attending to on Highway 207, just not far from Dufresne. So looks like it may be very slow going on that part of the highway, especially if you are going westbound. Very slippery. A few semis in the ditch, also got updates there. So very careful. Highway number 1 around the turnoff to Highway 12. Here in the city, got some updates. Northbound St. Mary's, just before Fermor, there's a illegally parked car in the curb lane causing some backups. Heard from St. Vital Import. As well, Neil called. Southbound Isabel, just north of Notre Dame in the right, there's a stalled car causing backups all the way up to Salter. So keep a left to get around that as well. Overall, those things seem to be fairly slippery on the highways kind of across the province. Heard from Andrew, Highway 10 through Riding Mountain, greasy, foggy as well there. If you have anything else that you want to let me know about, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Okay, so cuteness alert, just for a minute here. You got to indulge us with this because it's 8:15 right now, and I was singing, actually. I sing in studio all the time. If you watch on YouTube, you know. So I was singing along to something, and Corey said his little guy, who's like the cutest in the world, Cal, does he sing to himself in his crib?
Yeah, actually, I just got Annika always gives me updates because she's on kind of morning duty while I'm here, and she said he woke up and he was crying for a little bit, but then he kind of went back down and just kind of sang himself back to sleep.
He sings himself to sleep. Anyway, we have sounds of Cal, but this is because you took him out to something Winnipeggers can go to and see themselves.
Right, it's finally warm enough out there that I picked up Cal from daycare. I popped him in our little hiking backpack, and we went down to Arctic Alley, or Back Alley Arctic as it's called, in Wolseley, where you go down this back lane. It's between Kenora and Ethelbert, and this artist, Cal Barteski, back in 2017, made these beautiful paintings on the garages, on the fences, of Arctic animals everywhere. Polar bears, owls, gorgeous. And I like to take Cal down there to practice our animal sounds. So here's a couple of the ones. So what I do, I kind of point at it and I say, like, what sound is that? So here's what a wolf sounds like.
Exactly.
So,
dead ringer.
The dead ringer. That's a bang on wolf howl. Okay, and then here's an owl.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, see,
all
that was
right.
pretty good. And then this one, he's very advanced. This is very scientifically exactly what a beluga sounds like. Right?
That's exactly it. So I think listeners are probably leaning in going, is that a beluga? Or is that Corey's baby? How old's Cal?
He's like coming up on 16 months old. So he pretty impressive beluga impression there.
Check out Arctic Alley if you feel like phoning the listener line with your own sound, 788-3205. Well, up next on CBC, this half hour now, we're about to hear an exclusive interview that I mentioned that we'd recently had. Weeks after his death, loved ones of Afolabi Opaso were waiting for answers. We heard about the rally, the march happening this weekend. The 19-year-old Nigerian international student was killed by Winnipeg police on New Year's Eve after being fatally shot. A lawyer representing the family says Opaso was experiencing a mental health episode when he was killed. Now, for some, his death is a reminder of another. In 2019, 43-year-old Machwar Madut was killed by Winnipeg police, also during a mental health crisis. There was an IIU investigation. It cleared officers who shot him. But almost 5 years after his death, loved ones are still waiting for an inquest to understand more information, more about what happened the day he died. Akulyak Deng is Madut's ex-wife. By the time he died, the couple had already been apart for 6 years, but they remained close. They immigrated to Canada from South Sudan together in 2003. They shared 3 kids who they were co-parenting. Akulyak has never spoken publicly about her ex-husband's death, but she says she has never stopped searching for justice for him. I reached her recently in this exclusive CBC interview in Edmonton.
Hello, Marcy.
Thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Why did you want to speak publicly now about this?
Because I want to fight for justice for my husband and for my kids too. They need to know what happened to their dad so that they can move on with life, knowing the truth about what went down 5 years ago. To be in the dark for 5 years is hard for a kid to move on with life, like schooling and other chores of life to do. Even right now, I'm talking to you. Some are having difficulties of choosing different things to do in life. There's something dragging them behind. If you don't know the truth about what you're living for, your own dad is being killed, and 5 years later, you still don't have answer to it. So when is the life going to be better for you, for me?
What updates have you been given by the chief medical examiner about the inquest? I mean, as you said, it's been 5 years.
None. I have not gotten anything resolved. I was waiting. I went there for inquest time 2021. I was there 2022. They told us that until we find a medical document, we'll resume the inquest so that we can give the detail. Until now, we're waiting for that.
I want to read you what they've told CBC. I know we've shared this with you off air, but so the listeners know. We reached out to the Manitoba government. We asked about the inquest into the case. A spokesperson said, quote, "The inquest process is ongoing, with the next hearing still to be scheduled. There were a number of unique challenges with this case that have prolonged the inquest process, including delays while the IIU investigation was completed, the gathering of victims' medical records, and determining the final list of people and organizations that would be granted standing for the inquest. In addition, this occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic, which significantly impacted scheduling," end quote. So you sort of spoke to some of this talking about records, but did they tell you the same thing that they told CBC?
They didn't tell me. This is the first time I heard from Chidi and from you today. These papers that you guys, they go find, they were in the system, in the hospital. It's a matter of logging in, has the right doctor, and give it to you. If there's justice to be done, it will be done. I can give them an excuse for COVID-19. All right, that makes sense. But what about those 2 years again? I have that email. They can reach me at that. Sandy is my family friend. So why is it like that? CBC knows about it? I don't know about it. I'm the caregiver of the kid. Is that fair?
Just to reiterate, what you're saying there is the first you heard of it was when they responded to us They hadn't responded to you. Your friend Sandy Dang is always there ready for any updates. They didn't go through her to articulate to you. And you're mentioning Chidi, that's our producer here. So they had lots of ways to get a hold of you, and they didn't give you updates.
I was wondering, I said, why? Am I not that important? My husband is very important for me. I need to find justice for him. I'm a living human being that have feeling. Things are hard for me. My children, they have gone through a lot of difficulties. Living with a single mom that is a father and a mother at the same time. They need something that they're lacking financially, emotionally, and physically. They need that around. So I am the physical person with financial assistance and everything. That is not enough. A word of advice from a father on the phone or in person is good. But right now, everything is empty. At least they need to know the truth about it. Oh, my dad was killed because of this and that. Okay, what can I do to be better? Or what can I do to lift up his name while he's not alive anymore? Myself, I'm struggling with my own mental problem. Not because I'm mentally sick, but I am mentally sick because of this situation I am in.
How old are the kids now?
18, 20, and 21.
Yeah.
The 20 years old now has dropped at school, and she's not doing good. As a mother, the way I feel like I failed. But I am one person. I can't do father and mother at the same time. But I did what I could to raise her up.
People can hear what your relationship was. We mentioned this was your ex-husband that was killed, but you still call him husband as we're talking. And we say you're co-parenting the kids. With your kids, what were they like when they arrived in Canada before this versus how they are now after this death?
They are having question. Why did we come here if we are suffering the same way we're suffering in Africa, like Dad used to say? Say, my kid, I brought you here to this country so that you can have a good education, a good life. Where we were from, there was always gunshot. Every time you're running for your life. And now you are here, go back to school and learn and do a better life. Okay, where's the better life that we were here for? Where that refuge we came for? Protection. It's not with our dad himself. It was not protected. He was not. And we are here trying to fight for our life. Tomorrow, what are we going to be? Our men as Sudanese or African, we are always fear about our men being killed. Like that young boy. So the kids are always questioning, okay, the refugees I came for to be protected. We're getting killed instead. We are facing a hardship in a land that is meant to be for safety. Pardon me if I say speaking negative, but this is how I feel. Because I don't like the way we are living here as refugees that need to be protected. Our men especially are not in a good shape in this country.
In Manitoba, there's a history of inquests that have been affected by lengthy delays. Some have taken like 10 years, a decade to be completed. What do you make of that?
It should not take 10 years. When they were called, they didn't take time to question him, but they're taking time. What that make? It doesn't make any sense to me. Not 5 years, 10 years. It should not be that long. To me, I don't know. Maybe I'm saying, okay, this is just a black person. Who cares about it? If it's not to have justice or not.
You talked about the impact this weight has had on yourself and on your children, but also both you and Machwar have family back home in South Sudan, including his mother. What's that been like for you? How do you explain to her and other family members there what's happening here?
His mother is always asking me, how did my son die? Whenever I get the phone on her, she will ask me that question. And I don't have an answer for her. And it's weighing me down more. What answer do I have for him? None.
How would the completion of an inquest help your family?
It will at least make us know the truth or what went down that time. Who was the witness? Was it his fault? Was it the police themselves' fault? Okay, if it was his fault, what did he do wrong? If you want to disarm somebody, you have to disarm somebody by shooting their hand or their leg. In his case, he was shot in the heart 3 times.
You want information about more detail of what transpired that day, because that's what an inquest is about, more information, not to determine guilt, but more information. You tried, I understand, to speak to the officer that killed your ex-husband, but you were denied the chance during the IIU investigation. If you could speak to the officer today, what would you say?
I said, why did you kill him? Was it hard for you to shoot him in the arm or in the hand or leg so that you can question him more closer? Somebody who have a hammer and have a distance for you, how can he hit you with it? If you can just shoot him in the arm. Or if you're having difficulty about hearing him, you call a translator. I am a support worker. There is this violent thing you can learn how to prevent yourself.
You talked about this a little bit already, but what did you think about learning when you heard what happened to El Paso?
I felt all the pain that I had felt when Machuar passed. I said, why? 19 years old. He's just the same age as my daughter. And this boy now got killed. In what offense are we getting in this country? We come here to die, or do we come here to do our life better? That's the question that came to my mind. Are we citizens of this Canada? Are we being treated fair in this country or not? What is going on?
Take a moment here. I know you said you're speaking today in the name of hoping to seek justice. Just as a last question, next month is 5 years since Machuar was killed. What does it mean to you to see today members of the community here in Winnipeg still remembering him and still advocating for justice in his name?
It gave me hope, strong hope, because that community is my community. I was a Winnipeg member, and we live in that community. Machuar was the one that would stand with the community, and the community stand with him as their brother. And when they remember him as he was, because he's not a violent person. He was there with that mental issue, but that community, that is what is called a community connection. If I go there today, I will not have to suffer where to go and where to sit or eat or whatever I need, I will get from there, because I am there as their sister, as their mom. You have seen it. You are there in Winnipeg. You have seen the Sudanese. That community is my family.
Akuliak Dang, the ex-wife of Machuar Madut, she speaks out for the very first time this morning on CBC. Madut was killed by Winnipeg police 5 years ago, February 2019. Police officers involved in the shooting were cleared during an IIU investigation, but an inquest into his death has been open since November of 2019 with no dates called. As you heard during the interview, I quoted what the province told us January 9th about the status of the inquest. We asked the province yesterday if there have been any updates since the response was sent, and also to comment on Akuliak Dang's concern that the province is not communicating with her. We will bring you that response when it arrives. Let's dip into traffic before the news, Corey.
Just got calls from both Leah and Joseph. There's a semi stalled right in the intersection of McPhillips and Inkster. Looks like it was traveling down Inkster and stalled right in that intersection there on McPhillips, blocking pretty much the whole intersection, but you can sneak around right on whether you're going north or southbound. So keep right to get around that semi. It is causing big backups, as you can imagine, both ways. Also, still a jackknife semi that last I heard of about 15 minutes ago that it's still there. Westbound Highway number 1, right between Highway 12 and Highway 206, blocking pretty much the entirety of westbound Highway 1. Keep right to get around that as well. Very slow. You have to kind of take the shoulder to get around, also causing big backups for folks too. Give me a call if you see anything else. 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is cloudy, -2 right now in Winnipeg. We do have a risk of freezing drizzle. Our high, -1. The ex-wife of a man killed by Winnipeg police nearly 5 years ago questions why it has taken so long for an inquest. Machuar Madut was fatally shot in February 2019. Manitoba's chief medical officer called an inquest into his death that same year. Still, no hearings have been held. Madut's former wife, Akuliak Dang, says their 3 children need closure.
your own dad is being killed, and 5 years later you still don't have answer to it. So when is the life going to be better for you, for me?
The province says the case has a number of unique challenges. A hearing date has not been scheduled at this time. The co-founder of a Winnipeg-based de-escalation team supports the collection of race-based data by RCMP. 2 weeks ago, the Mounties started a pilot project in 3 Canadian communities, including Thompson. People's races are collected by officers during arrests, wellness checks, or when there's use of force. Daniel Hidalgo helps run Sabe Peace Walkers. He is half Jamaican and half Indigenous from Chile. Hidalgo says he has had negative interactions with police in the past, and he feels it's due in part to the way he looks. That's why he says he supports the initiative.
If we use that data to find remedial responses and to promote positive resources, for me, I'm all for that. And I think that could also contribute to police learning new approaches and finding ways to essentially become relationship-based de-escalators.
But Hidalgo says it could be tricky for officers using visual observations alone to collect that data. He says there should be conversations and ways for people to self-identify. A Manitoba protester is celebrating the federal court ruling that the government overstepped its bounds by using the Emergencies Act. The federal government used that act to clear a convoy protest in Ottawa where thousands of people occupied the downtown for weeks in 2022. In Winnipeg, a similar protest took place in front of the Manitoba Legislative Building. Eric Fleury spent 2 weeks in an RV in opposition to COVID restrictions.
Validation for all of us that stood up for the rights and freedoms of Canadians across this country. I think that as time goes on, that more and more of the truth will come out.
Fleury believes the court ruling could pave the way for reparations for those who were directly impacted by the invoking of the Emergencies Act. Russia says a military transport plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has crashed. Video posted online showing the plane exploding in a fireball in the Russian region of Belgorod near Ukraine. Russian officials say all 74 people on board have died. The aircraft was reportedly carrying the prisoners of war to the border for an exchange. It is not clear what caused the crash. Russia's foreign ministry, though, says Ukraine shot the plane down. Ukrainian officials say they are looking into Moscow's claims, and Russian investigators are on the way to that crash site. In this country, officials in the Northwest Territories are expected to reveal today how many people died in a plane crash near Fort Smith by the Alberta border. The Northwestern airplane was carrying workers to the Diavik diamond mine.
At this time, we're only saying that there are fatalities. We know there are fatalities, but we don't know how many. Once the team is on the ground and has visited the site, we'll issue an official statement.
You can hear the latest on these stories and other national and international news coming up at 9 o'clock. The city of Winnipeg has filed separate lawsuits against 2 vacant property owners this month for allegedly racking up about $20,000 each in unpaid inspection bills and other fees. Together, the two own 6 vacant buildings across Winnipeg's inner city. All the buildings have been subject to a number of annual inspections between 2016 and 2023. Both owners were billed yearly inspection charges and empty building fees during those years, but the city says both have failed to pay any of the money they owe. The allegations have not been proven in court, and statements of defense have not been filed. People in St. Teresa's Point First Nation are anxiously waiting for temperatures to drop. They need colder weather so more winter roads can open. Some winter roads started opening last Friday, but many are still closed. St. Teresa Point Chief Raymond Flett wants more all-season roads for remote communities. Without them, he says they're at the mercy of the weather.
This weather, right, this trend, it's very warm weather, the road won't last because they just started packing and it's not really solid yet.
The rest of the winter road system will open between January 26th and February 9th. Winter roads make more than 2,500 shipments, that's 2,500 shipments of goods possible every year. You can find more news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather Wells, for the morning.
Thank you.
Well, while we're talking roads, why don't we check what's going on in the commute here, southern commute?
For sure. There's a stalled semi right at the intersection of McPhillips and Inkster. Looks like it was going down Inkster and then stopped right in that intersection with McPhillips there. I heard from both Joseph and Leah that it's blocking pretty much most of northbound and southbound McPhillips, except for the far right-hand sides of it. So keep right to get around if you are going. It is causing pretty big backs of people as people kind of slow down looking for that. Also, Jackknife Semi, Highway number 1, westbound, keep right to get around that. It's pretty much blocking the entirety of it. That's between Highway 12 and Highway 206. Very, very slippery. A few semis in the ditch, I've heard from folks. So be careful if you are hitting the highways this morning. It's very, very slippery with some of that freezing drizzle we got.
Last look at the weather. Abby, you've been smiling ear to ear all morning.
I know, we're just warmer than seasonal. That's why I'm smiling. But I need to give people heads up that because of this warm weather, there's also that risk of freezing drizzle for most of the south. We're actually at -2 right now. We're going to be seeing a high. We're heading to -1 later in the day.
Fair enough. All right, thank you. Thanks to our live team this morning, Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi, as well as Travis Peterson behind the YouTube controls, Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, and Joni Nicolo in our news department, our hardworking team of associate producers, as well as our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening. We're here again tomorrow. The Current's next on CBC.